Hang on, let me remind myself of what Chargeman Ken is. Ugh, stupid keyboard is stuck on my other keyboard. Okay, Chargeman Ken. Okay, I've only seen clips of this, and God, does that look goofy. Yeah, I've seen clips of this. Look at that art. It's not the style that is making me laugh. It's the proportions on his legs. The main guy, look at his legs. Like what? Where are the bones in his body? He's got no bones. Oh God, that's way too funny. Yeah, this is a very old anime. There's the fact he's got no bones in his body. His body is actually way too small, like his torso. This girl, I don't know what's with her neck. And I can't even make out what's the orientation of her. Is this bit, what's this little bit in the corner right there? Below the beads, like to the left of the beads. Is that her knee? And is she facing us? Or has she got her head turned towards us? I can't tell. Because she's got a collar, and the front of the collar is pointing upwards. Right? And then what the hell is this alien thing in an egg next to him? See, I don't know what's going on. Like, this is just so weird. But I've seen clips of this. Alright. See if there are any... Oh, I'm sure there are reviews for it. Someone's going to give it a 10. There we go. My Anime List. The worst website on the internet for anime reviews. Although, for an anime like this, people give it 10s ironically. As is the case here. This is the room of anime. Oh my God, that's a very high praise for it. But yeah, no, if you actually read the review, obviously, it's an ironic one. But genuinely, there are some really bad shows where people unironically give things a 10. Dynamite in the Brain. Mental Clinic of Terror. I need to watch these. Oh, so these are just episodes. I definitely need to watch them. Darling in the Franxx is a garbage show. Such high production, so much talent put into that show, and man does it suck. Story, the characters, just rubbish. I don't know what they had in mind with the direction of the story. It just goes off the rails. And that studio has the same ending for almost all of their anime. Big dumb robot fight, giant oversized galactic conflict. So this is not going to be a tier list of all the anime I've watched because there's way too much. Instead, I want to talk about some anime that I recommend. Now, I will be recommending some popular, common stuff that most people have seen, because I'm going to assume that not everybody has seen everything, and also there's likely to be some people who haven't seen much anime or haven't seen any anime, and they're possibly wondering where to start. So usually the quality popular stuff is a good starting spot. This will be purely anime, and in relation to manga, if the manga is significantly better, where I would put the manga on the list instead, I will not recommend the anime. Although there's very few cases of that. Because generally, if the anime is good, then the manga is also good, right? That's usually a given. If the anime is terrible, most of the time the manga is also terrible. Despite what people say about the manga being better, very often it's, yes, the manga is better, but it's still crap. And the other issue is there's a lot of anime where it's just incomplete. Like, it's like severely incomplete. And in that case, it's like just, you have to go read the manga anyway. Right, now, so I've got top recommendations. These are things that I particularly like and particularly recommend. High, obviously highly recommended. And then unusual, this is where stuff that will go where it's not the best, but it's interesting enough that it's worth a watch. So I won't be recommending anything bad except if it goes in the unusual section, it might be a bad anime, but still worth watching. Like, you know, perhaps something like Chargeman Ken. If I'd seen Chargeman Ken, maybe it would go down there. But there could be some good anime in the unusual. It's just not that great. So I'll mostly be talking about stuff that I really like. That's the main thing. Do people want to start with old or new? I reckon I'm going to start with popular. We'll start with popular stuff first, just to get it out of the way. We'll get the obvious things out of the way first. And then we'll start to get a bit more obscure and a bit more unusual as we go. So, in fact, I'm going to start with my number one recommendation for people who haven't seen anime and want to get into anime. And that is Cowboy Bebop. It's an obvious pick, and it's an obvious pick for a reason. Cowboy Bebop is super accessible to anyone, except for kids. Except for little kids, obviously. It's got a lot of variety. It's got a lot of interesting themes. The fact that it's also episodic rather than one big continuous story means you can just pick up and watch at any point. There's really fun characters. I absolutely love the dog, Ein. I want to get corgis are my favorite dogs, and I want to get a corgi of my own. The whole cast is great. I like every single episode. And on top of that, despite being a fairly old anime at this point, the production values are insane for this show. And on top of that, the music is a 10 out of 10. Yoko Kanno is by far the best composer in anime. And if you want the perfect introduction to her, this is the anime. And the reason why this is my go-to first anime for non-anime viewers is because it's very little anime about it. But there is enough anime about it to go, that's an anime. You know, there's definitely anime stylings, but it's not weird anime. You don't want to start them with the weird stuff, right? You start them with the weird stuff, you'll scare them off. So, love Cowboy Bebop. Definitely top recommendation right up there. Now, I don't know what size these icons are going to be. We'll have to resize everything if it doesn't fit. For something a bit more modern, but also a very good entry anime, and this is another obvious pick, Full Metal Alchemist. Now, in this recommendation, I'm recommending both the old and the new versions of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Full Metal Alchemist. The reason I recommend the old one is because it does the content that's common between the two versions. The old one does it better. Yes, there will be movies. The old one does it better because they have more time. There's about twice as much screen time given to the common, short story bits in the old version compared to the new. I think with the new one, they went, well, everybody's seen the old one, so we'll kind of rush through that material, and then we'll slow down once we get to the new stuff, right? So I do recommend the old one, particularly if you want a perfect example of the old one doing it better, the Shotaka story. The weight of that story is so much stronger in the original version. However, once you get past the common content, the new one does it much better. Shotaka, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, he's the man responsible for creating Arknights. Without Shotaka's brilliance and absolute genius, we would not have Arknights. So you owe everything to Shotaka. He is the patron saint of Arknights. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch Fullmetal Alchemist, and then it'll make all sense. I don't want to give it away because it's one of the best stories in that show. Okay, what's another popular one? We're going to get something... I'm going to recommend something that's a little bit more anime. And this is another great one to recommend early-ish, but I would not recommend it right at the start, and that is Code Geass. Now, the reason why Code Geass is so good is A, the conflict is fantastic. There's a ton of great characters. The action, the strategy, the mind games, and all that is done really effectively. But one of the best things about this show is that it has a perfect ending. The ending to Code Geass, I won't give it away, obviously, is perfect. There is absolutely nothing I would change about this. There's only a couple of flaws with this, and in Season 2, there is a little bit too much of... it's the same issue that was in Pirates of the Caribbean 3, which is characters flip-flop allegiances a bit too often as like to just throw a random, wrench in the works. Like, I'm your ally, and then next episode, actually, I'm not your ally, and then the next episode, actually, I am your ally. There's a little bit of that, which is kind of annoying. Now, one thing I want to give a very strong warning. There's a series of movies alongside that remake the series, and then they continue the series. They are awful, especially the material that continues after the series. It is absolutely god awful. If you want to see a show that's like a 9 or a 10 out of 10, taken down to a 3 or a 2 out of 10, all you need to do is go and watch the Code Geass movie that continues the story. It is god awful. You're looking at two polar opposites of quality. It is genuinely one of the worst things ever made in anime. The movies are so bad, they completely undermine the entire point of the series. It completely misses what people liked about the series and what made it work and what made the characters interesting. Everything that's good in the series is gone in the sequel movies. It's just god awful. Don't watch them. Save yourself. Don't watch them. Void Tier and Mythic Dralic, thank you for the follows. Okay, next one. Let's see, what's another very common, very popular, easy to recommend one? Of course. Oh, what's wrong with the color? It's kind of appropriate because what's happened to this this image, it basically represents what happens in this show. Neon Genesis Evangelion. No, I think it's just the color setting for the canvas doesn't match the color setting for the file. Neon Genesis Evangelion. Excellent anime. And I'm specifically talking about the original series. Plus End of Evangelion to finish it off. Kind of similar to, in fact, very similar to Code Geass, although even more heartbreaking in many ways. Evangelion also got remade as a bunch of movies. The first movie is a near exact retelling of the same portion of the story. The second movie is very close, but it changes the ending. And then you get movies 3 and 4, which are total trash. Absolute rubbish movies. They look amazing. The production value, like Evangelion has never been more beautiful than in those movies. But my God, movies 3 and 4 are so crap. Absolutely awful. It's like, imagine if George Lucas, instead of just touching up the Star Wars movies and adding in all this rubbish to the Star Wars films. He thought, you know what? I'm going to remake the original trilogy to the same quality as the prequels. That's what I'm going to do. That's basically what they did with the second half of the Evangelion movies. So, watch the original series. Now, the original series, for those who haven't seen it, ran into some serious production issues towards the end. They basically ran out of money. And so the final 2 original episodes are basically nothing. There's no animation. It's a bunch of live action footage, you know, people in, I think there's people like in cinemas, there's shots of streets, there's still photos, just text on the screen. At some points, the screen is just black, just to fill time, right? And so what they ended up doing later, once they managed to get more funding, they ended up redoing the well, they redid the ending twice, pretty much. They sort of redid half of the ending with Death and Rebirth, which is honestly a waste of time to watch, because you could just watch End of Evangelion, which has the relevant parts, and it completely redoes the ending, and it's got a much better ending. So you'd watch, I believe it's the first 24 episodes of the original series, and then End of Evangelion, and you've got yourself the full series. Bit of a warning though, if you don't like really dark stuff, like really, really grim, Evangelion is not for you. It's a great series, but it is slightly traumatic on the kids. So I would not recommend watching that if you don't like that type of thing. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder where I can scoop away anything that I've recommended. That way it just filters it down for me. Okay, let's do a few movies, because these movies are pretty popular, and I'm sure everybody's heard of them. And we're going to pretty much do them all in sequence. We're going to do a bunch of Ghibli stuff all at once. Now, I'm not going to for the most part, I recommend pretty much every Ghibli movie. The only one I really don't recommend is Ponyo. Ponyo is full of absolutely irritating characters, no real plot. Some nice visuals, but, you know, ultimately a waste of time. Yeah, so I've picked out these 4, but for the most part, I recommend pretty much all of the Ghibli films. These are just my personal favorites. So obviously, Spirited Away. This is one that most people have probably seen. If you've only seen one anime film, it's probably Spirited Away. And this is an absolutely fantastic one. The story's great. I love the protagonist. The setting in the hot spring is absolutely just magical. I love the imagination, the creativity of it. It's really fun. Highly recommended. It's probably the first Ghibli film I recommend to watch. I think it's the most accessible. Then there's Howl's Moving Castle. Now this is based on a book by a British author, and personally, of the lighter Ghibli films, this is my favorite. I love Howl's Moving Castle. The castle itself, the mechanics of it, how it works. I love the magic system. I think Howl is a great character. Sophie in particular is such a strong character. I love her energy, her strength of mind. It's so good. It's so good. So, Howl's Moving Castle, another strong recommendation. And there's also the book to read if you like that. Then this is the one I particularly recommend to kids first, and that is My Neighbor Totoro. This is like, oh man, if you want cuteness, it doesn't get much cuter than Totoro. I mean, just look at these things. There's a reason why Totoro is the Ghibli mascot, because it's adorable. The two sisters are fantastic characters. I love their relationship and their dynamic. It's a very simple story. There's not much to it. It's really just about the innocence of kids. Highly recommended. Now, if you want something completely different from Totoro, and you want your life to be ruined, I recommend Grave of the Fireflies. Now, Grave of the Fireflies is the saddest film I've ever seen, genuinely, and it's a little hard for me to it's a little hard for me to talk about it because it affects me so much. Just thinking about thinking about the what happened in the story in that, and it's genuinely really, it's a really powerful film. So if you don't like sad films, there is no film I recommend less than this, but it's a really, really, really good film. I think it's the best film Ghibli has ever made, but it's also the one I never want to rewatch again because it affected me so much. Yeah, very, very strong film. But let me tell you, it's unbelievably sad. Hang on, I need some water. And yeah, don't watch it with your kids. Please don't. You'll traumatize them. Okay, let's recommend some stuff that I want to start filling out this high area a little bit. So I'm going to put some things that I highly recommend, but I don't put right at the top. Let's go for... I'm going to go for something slightly more unusual. Here we go. Now, this one, I'm sure everybody's heard of. And if you haven't heard of this anime, you've definitely heard its music. Because its music is part of... several of its tracks are part of several different memes. The most famous one, obviously, being Deja Vu. If you've ever heard the Deja Vu, yep, there we go. And Sai, with that, the perfect emote for for this anime. Basically, that emote is this anime in a nutshell. The soundtrack for this series is stellar. Absolutely, it's a 10 out of 10 soundtrack. And there's 4 seasons, and then there's a couple of OVAs in between. Each season has its own soundtrack. They are... it's such good music. But on top of that, the racing is really good. So for anyone who doesn't know, Initial D, the premise is about illegal street racing at night in Japan. Mostly takes place in the mountains. It's not exactly based on a true story, but the character is loosely based on a real person who learned to drive by doing deliveries for his dad. And he's a real, he's a real pro drifter. And basically, it's a little bit Fast and the Furious, but instead of where in Fast and the Furious, it's just about, muscle cars and power and over-the-top crazy, stupid action, which is very fun in its own right. Initial D is a lot more about the craft of the race and the drift in particular, because the roads they drive on, these mountain roads, if you've ever driven in the mountains, are very windy. And so you need, if you want to go as fast as you can, obviously you need to be able to drift really well. There's lots of interesting characters, lots of great races. The only negatives of this show is the CG is outdated for the cars, as you can already tell based on this poster, and there is a romance subplot for the main character, and it's extremely weak. It honestly feels like half the time they forget that the romance subplot exists, or that even the character exists. However, if you like cars, even if you're not really that into cars, I definitely highly recommend Initial D. At the very least, just the first season. Yes, yeah. The guy himself was a consultant for the creation of this show and the races, and you would be amazed at how many interesting races they can get out of this concept. Because you're thinking, well, it's just one car against another car going down a hill and going down a mountain, and they're just drifting, and then basically when one guy overtakes the other, it's pretty much over. How many times can you do that? Surely it can't be that interesting. Yet it is. They really make it that interesting. And yes, the real Drift King, you can look him up on YouTube. He's absolutely great. The dude is a complete psycho when it comes to driving, but obviously he's a complete professional, so there's no worries there. Something else I want to highly recommend. Let's go for something a bit older. All right, Macross. Specifically, the first Macross, which I think is the best one, because it gets the concept of Macross correct the best. And it also has that old school charm to it. Now, so the premise of Macross is really interesting. As you can see on the front, there's obviously a girl singing there, and there's mechs, and there's, space battles and stuff. The poster is literally what this show is about. It's about music and space mech battles. The conflict is between Earth and these aliens, and all the aliens are giant, and they come from this complete warrior society where everyone, all they do is fight. Their entire society has no art, no real culture of its own. It's just, everyone's there just for combat. And so, when they go to war with the humans, and they hear this girl sing, she's aboard like the spaceship, the main spaceship, and people start to, the aliens, they infiltrate the human ship and all that, and they hear the music and they experience art for the first time, and it just blows their minds, and it starts to convert them because they like the music. And so the war is not waged with guns, it's waged with art. Art is the key to victory in Macross. It's a great series. Only problems with it, it's quite old, and it's a little jank in the art department, in the animation department. Also, the voice acting is not the best for a few of the characters, and sadly, the worst voice acting is by the girl herself, because the singer, the actress who does the singing, is also the voice actress, which is a very common thing to have these days. But she's not the greatest actress. And on top of that, she also voiced her character in the dub as well. And she's got a very strong accent. And yes, it's quite authentic to the character, but the performance is very poor. So it's a little jank. But it still doesn't really detract from the show because it's old, and you get... it's like watching an old movie where the special effects aren't that great. It's fine, because it's old. So it doesn't bother you like a bad piece of CG in a 2020 film would affect you. Okay. Let's pick something unusual. All right, I'm gonna pick this one. Now this one, if you haven't seen this, but you've ever heard of it, it's likely because you saw a fairly popular clip on YouTube of someone who looks like this eating a guy who looks similar to this. And when I say eating, I mean literally, she turns into a monster and then bites his head off. This show is called Kimono Zume. It is about, it's in a world where you have these like monster people. So they look like humans, but they, when they lose control, they transform into monsters. And they always have like a hunger. Versus this like samurai sort of clan that hunts them down. And the premise is very Romeo and Juliet, where she, from the monster side, falls in love with him from the samurai side, and they basically both run away together, and then they get hunted down by people from his clan, and they also encounter other monsters along the way. Now, it's not the greatest show. It's pretty solid. It's a bit thin on the characters and the plot, but visually, it is very unusual, very unique, very interesting, and the gore is really like, I did not see that coming kind of gore. If you manage to find that clip on YouTube of the girl eating the guy that she's kissing. Oh yeah, I should mention that. They're both making out on a bench in a park, and then she randomly transforms into a monster out of lust, and then bites him, bites his head off. So yes, not the greatest thing, but if you want something unusual, I definitely recommend Kemonozume. And it'll also teach all of you horny guys in chat to think twice. Now, for an absolute classic goldmine of comedy and trash, we have Ghost Stories. I'm sure everybody's heard of this. You can watch all the best parts on YouTube if you want to, although it's worth watching the full series. Ghost Stories is a terrible, terrible anime. It's one of the worst anime ever made. It was so bad and such a big flop that when they licensed it over to in English, they gave permission for the dubbing company to do whatever they wanted with the anime. The only thing, there was just a few rules. They weren't allowed to change the actual overall plot itself, like the goal of the story. They weren't allowed to change any of the folklore, I think, because it is based on, random Japanese like folklore monsters and ghost stories and that type thing. These kids are basically like a ghost hunting club. And this is basically Stranger Things, the anime. And there was like one other thing, like they weren't allowed to do certain kind of jokes. There was just a few minor restrictions. Other than that, they could do whatever they wanted. And boy, is it hilarious. It is so funny in the dub. This girl is a radical born-again Christian, if I remember correctly. This guy's Jewish, and all the jokes are about him being Jewish, and he keeps making fun of that. It's got a bit of a South Park vibe to it in that sense. The cat can talk. Everybody's like just filthy mouth. It's very South Park. Basically, if you took South Park and you redubbed an anime as South Park, you've basically got Ghost Stories. If you search it on YouTube, you can find compilations of the best bits. It is so funny. It's highly recommended, but I'm going to put it in the unusual because of the type of show that it is. It's garbage, but great. Also, production quality is terrible as well, but that goes without saying. There's pretty much no effort in the animation. Next recommendation. Okay, we'll do a few more movies. We'll actually get through... let's get through all the Shinkai stuff real quick. Okay. These are all... I recommend his entire library of work, pretty much, except for The Place Promised in Our Early Days and The Children Chase Lost Voices. Kind of dull. They're not that interesting. But apart from that, I recommend pretty much everything else that he's done. Your Name. I think this is the highest grossing anime film of all time, if I remember correctly. Maybe beaten by Demon Slayer. I think Demon Slayer has beaten it. Or maybe this is still the highest grossing in the West. I don't quite remember. But yeah, Your Name, really fun. If you haven't seen it, the premise is that these two, they basically he's from the city, she's from the country. They wake up like as each other. It's really fun show. I won't give away the story, but basically the There's a meteor coming, it's going to crash, and they need to figure out what to do with it. Very beautiful film. That's the one thing Makoto Shinkai is known for. He does absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous work. And he's got that very nice style. So I definitely recommend, strongly recommend Your Name. Then there's Weathering With You, if you like end of the world due to the Great Flood. Basically, there's this girl who can control the weather, and this is in a world where it just basically doesn't stop raining, and the world is flooding. It's a nice film. I didn't like it as much as Your Name. I didn't think the characters were as fun, but I still absolutely loved it. And again, visually, it's just so gorgeous. So gorgeous. So for me, that one goes into high recommendation. I'm going to leave Voices of a Distant Star for the moment. Garden of Words. This was the first time Shinkai did like that super pretty, super pretty art style that he did. When you see like screenshots from this anime of the trees and the lake and all that, it's as close to real life as you can get in an anime. It's such a gorgeous film. It's only 30 minutes long. It's almost entirely set in I think it's the Shinjuku Park, which I've been to. Very, very beautiful park. If you're ever in Tokyo, I highly recommend going to visit it. Absolutely gorgeous anime. The story, though, needed a little bit more. It does feel a little, not fleshed out enough, basically. And there's 5 centimeters per second. This was, I think, the first time he sort of started to really make a name for himself. This one is, of the ones that I'm recommending, apart from Voice for This Start, this is a bit weaker than the others. Hello, WEEB, welcome. 5 centimeters per second is a story all about regrets in life. This guy and this girl almost got together when they were younger, and it's all about all the times they almost get together as the times they almost meet as they get older, and it's all about the regret and, what if I'd done something different? He's living a pretty boring, salaryman life, and he's just reminiscing about how different things would have been if he'd had this girl in his life. Very melancholic film, but I do recommend it as well. Snow themed. As you can see, he's always got some kind of weather theme in each of his films. He really likes his weather. So let's bring that in just a little bit. And then Voice of a Distant Star. Now this one's going to go into the unusual because it's not that great of an anime. But it's almost entirely a one-man project. So Shinkai almost did this entire thing by himself. So it's like a 20-minute thing with good animation, some solid visuals. There's a little bit of jank here and there, which is understandable, obviously, but the quality for the amount of manpower put on this project is really impressive. And that's basically, he went, this is my resume. Here you go. This is what I can do. And so I recommend watching it just for just to see the quality of it, and just knowing the story behind its production. The plot itself is actually quite interesting. It's a very Shinkai story, and actually it does. You can see hints of 5 centimeters per second and Your Name in Voice of a Distant Star. Basically, these two are a couple. They're high school sweethearts. She volunteers to join, I think it's the army or something, and I don't know if it's the army or if it's like an exploration expedition, but she's in this mech and they're going off onto a distant planet. And the further away she gets, the longer it takes for her text messages to reach him, back and forth. And basically, like, the further and further it gets, the longer and longer she has to wait. and like you know, it just gets sadder and sadder. It's like it's a pretty sad, sad anime. It's no Grave of the Firefly sad, obviously, but it's definitely the saddest thing Shinkai has ever done. Solid watch, and it's only 20 minutes long, so easy to recommend as well. Okay. Right, enough sadness. Shinkai is a bit of a sad guy. Let's do some comedies. Right, one of the best modern comedies in anime. Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun. Or Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-kun. Absolutely hilarious. Love this anime. Every character in this is amazing. Sakura, the protagonist, is just so adorable, so funny. The premise of this anime is this guy, high school guy, is the author of one of the most popular shoujo manga series. And she finds out, she's a huge fan of this series and of the author. And he writes like teenage girls so well that she's convinced that whoever the author is for this series must be like some, you know, it's got to be some woman, you know, who really tapped into her, you know, her teenage years, or, you know, if it's not someone like that, then it's going to be someone who really understands teenage girls, you know, extremely well. But then she finds out it's him, and this guy is a complete dunce, but he's really good at what he does, and so she becomes like basically his assistant, and the whole show is just parody and satire of the shoujo genre. It is so funny. It absolutely needs more seasons. There is the manga as well, which is quite long. The manga is not as good because the manga is in a 4 format. So 4 that's when it's just 4 panels on each page, and usually like one page is like the one gag or whatever, right? You can, like a Garfield comic, basically. You can read just the one page and you'll get something out of it. I don't know why they went with that format. I just don't think it works as well. The anime doesn't have any hints of the 4 ties whatsoever, and it is just so good. So this is an absolute top tier anime. Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun, you are going well up there. Okay, right. We'll put a bit of comedy. Let's put a bit of horror. So this is an anime called Shiki, and Shiki is it's a vampire story set in like a rural village. And in this rural town, this new family moves in. They buy like the big mansion, the big castle nearby, and they're all a little weird. Like they even look a tad weird, and people are like, okay, something's up with these. With these dudes. There's something about these dudes. You know, I don't trust them. And then obviously, as is the case with vampire stories, weird things start to happen in town, and there's like, you know, someone, you know, falls sick. She no longer goes to school. People are wondering what's happening, and it's obviously the vampires that are turning people in the village into vampires. And so the protagonist, funnily enough, is neither of the two characters here. I just couldn't find a better image for this. The real protagonist is the doctor in town. And he's a city doctor, and he's the one with the most like level head and logic in town. Whereas everybody else is like going full, superstitious nut jobs and all that. You know, thinking things are just fine, or it's, you know, it's the devil or whatever, right? We need to just pray and it'll go away, that kind of thing. And the doctor's trying to figure out what's going on and obviously see if there's, you know, any way to combat these vampires. Great series. The way the situation devolves and the madness that grips the town is really good. It's an absolutely fascinating anime to watch. And the visual style is great. It's got really bold, bright, strong colors. and you can't really see it in this image, but the visual that I like the most about this series is the way the eyes are drawn, the irises. They look really, really distinct and really, it really grabs your attention, particularly for the vampires. But yes, highly recommended anime. Definitely a great Halloween watch. Okay, let's go for something a bit more Japanese. Right, so now this is a manga cover, I believe. I couldn't find a good anime cover. But this is Moribito, Guardian of the Spirit. This one is about this woman. She's like a mercenary warrior, and she's hired by the queen, the mother of this kid, to take the kid away and protect him because the kid is going to be, I believe, if I remember correctly, he's going to be sacrificed in order to fix the problems in the land. It's one of those things where it's like, everything's gone wrong. We need a sacrifice. If we have a sacrifice, then I think it's either the sacrifice or someone wants to kill him. It's been a while, so someone wants to kill him. Basically, the reason why is not really that important. It's just someone wants to kill him. Mother hires this mercenary. She goes, take my kid, protect him from everyone, especially the king. Do not let the king anywhere near my kid. And so it's one of those classic Japanese traveling warrior with the kid story. There's a very common story type in Japan, like there's vagabond type stories, there's Ronin stories, and lone wolf and cub and so on. And this is another great example of that. It's got a lot of focus on like Bushido and the way of the samurai, that type of thinking, and the art of the sword, and all the philosophy behind it, and the sort of people and the sort of mentality that they have. There's this one great episode where there's several soldiers that are looking for these two. They need to get their weapons sharpened after a fight, and they go to this blacksmith to get them fixed. And while he's fixing their weapons, he tells them a story about this sword that he made, and the story of the sword is that the guy who had it made wanted the best sword you can ever make me, and it just goes into the philosophy behind it. It's really good. I won't give it away. It's not really like something you could really spoil, but it's just really fascinating to listen to. So yes, highly recommend Moribito as well. Okay, next one. Let's go back for something old school. Captain Harlock. Captain Harlock is really, really quite old at this point. I'm specifically recommending the original series because, much like Macross, it has that charm. It's got that real old school charm. And the premise is this guy, a Captain Harlock, pilots this ship, the Arcadia, if I recall correctly, which is half galleon ship, half spaceship, and he defends Earth from aliens. And aliens are... The government on Earth does not believe that these aliens exist. And they don't believe it to the point of absurdity. There's real, like, like satire and parody about the extremes at which, like, stupid people in power will just blindly ignore problems because it could affect their re-election. Like, I think it's the president. I don't know if it's the president of Earth or the president of Japan, but it's treated like the president of Earth. So I'm going to go and say it's the president of Earth. At one point, Harlock comes in and tells him, no, not Harlock, one of the scientists comes in and tells him that a weapon has dropped onto Earth, an alien weapon has dropped onto Earth, and it could potentially destroy the planet. And the guy tells the scientist to go away and let him sleep because he has a golf game to wake up for in an hour. The dude, no matter the crisis going on, the president is just playing golf. And he's playing golf like in his bedroom. He carries his golf club everywhere. It's so fun. But on top of that, the aliens are interesting. The conflict is interesting. Only negatives. Some of the art is a bit outdated. The audio quality could do with a bit of a boost. And also, it's at the threshold of when anime was drastically changing in the character visual styles. So what you think of as like, you know, you look at him, this is like a very typical anime design. But there was a time where characters had like pinpoint eyes and really weirdly shaped heads. And there are a few of those characters in this show for whatever reason, and I don't know why. They're not aliens, they're just humans, but they just look really weird and they look pretty goddamn awful. So Captain Harlock, that's another highly recommended anime. Now, if I do this, I can shrink it down a bit. And there we go. Yeah, it does kind of need a remaster, to be honest. I would like something like this to get a remaster in the same way they've done with Gundam and stuff. Okay, let's recommend. We've recommended a classic. Let's go for a couple of modern ones. One of the greatest franchises to ever grace anime, and it doesn't have just one, but it's got two amazing entries. So we've got the Ghost in the Shell movie, and we've got Ghost in the Shell standalone complex series. The Ghost in the Shell, easily one of the most famous, one of the most influential anime franchises, anime manga franchises of all time. The most interesting thing about Ghost in the Shell is that every version of it is different. And I don't just mean different style. The story and even the characters can be drastically different between versions. If you read the original manga and you watch the original movie, they are drastically different. The original manga has way more comedy. It's way more colorful. It's a bit more lighthearted. It's nowhere near as grim and dark as the movie, or as dire about the future as the movie. Then you've got Standalone Complex, which is like a detective serial, but set in a cyberpunk future. And then if you go and read the second manga, it's now a half CG, half hand-drawn manga. And this is really quite an old one, so it's like the CG is not very good. It's not aged well at all. And it's almost the entire series is set inside inside the virtual world where all the ghosts reside. It's something completely different. And then you look at like the most recent one, which was a completely CG Ghost in the Shell, where it's all about mercenaries, and it's become a bit a little bit Metal Gear Solid, you know, in the mercenary slant. Not very good. The ones that I recommend is the original movie and Standalone Complex, and it's got 2 seasons for Standalone Complex. These are both absolute top tier anime. Easy to recommend both of them. And the cases in Standalone Complex are really fascinating. The villains are so interesting. And the best thing, for me, what makes Ghost in the Shell stand out so much is that they've truly managed to capture what a world would be like with the technology that they've created for this story. You know? You really get a sense of, you know, if people, say for example, if people could transplant their brains into a cyborg body, what else could you do? What kind of crimes could you commit, for instance, right? Like, could you just go into somebody else's body, commit a crime, and then leave their body, and it looks like they've committed, you know, somebody else has committed the crime, right? It's so good. So good. You know, it's so fascinating. Cannot recommend Ghost in the Shell enough. And I also recommend, we're not doing manga, but I also recommend the first manga as well. Let's pick another unusual one. Right. So, you're not going to see very much shonen anime on this list, particularly the battle stuff, because it's kind of all the same. They're good, but for the most part, they aren't that great. What's more interesting, and also most shonen anime is 1,000 episodes long, and recommending 1,000 episodes to somebody is just irresponsible. What I will recommend though is something a bit unusual. If you like that shonen action stuff and you want something a bit weirder, a bit crazier, I recommend, now, I don't know if the pronunciation is meant to be scried, but I'm pretty sure it's meant to be S-cry-ed, hyphened, S-cry, C-R-Y -ed. S-cry-ed, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. In this world, there's like this zone in Japan where people basically get infected and they get given superpowers. Imagine, or just think Originium, right? And everybody's got their own unique power, and it's very the powers are very like one-track powers. It's not like a Naruto or it's not like Naruto where everybody's got like a whole bunch of abilities. For the most part, everybody has like the one thing that they do, right? So the protagonist, he's got this arm that allows him to just, punch really strong. And it also has like a rocket booster to basically allow him to fly forward. Then, another guy, he has the ability to transform his car into a supercar, and he can drive incredibly fast and never crash. He's the greatest character. He's a very JoJo-like character. There's a bit of a JoJo vibe to this. It's not the greatest series, but if you like over-the-top, weird, super-powered action, S-Cryed at just one season long is a perfect show to watch. It's really fun. For completely wacky, the disastrous life of Saiki K. This is a more recent anime. Super funny. This guy, the protagonist, he's a super powered psychic. He can basically read everybody's minds. He's practically God, right? As close as you can get to God amongst psychics, and he hates it, and he hates everybody around him, pretty much. Nothing surprises him. He is completely blasé about everything in life. And so the show is really about all these weird characters that are in his life around him, and him basically just trying to avoid. It's even weirder than Mob Psycho 100. Like, if you took Mob Psycho and you just dialed it up even further, you got even weirder. And it's really just him dealing with all these annoying people around him. Like, just everyone in his life is like the dumbest person you've ever met. So yeah, very funny show. Highly recommend you watch The Disastrous Life of Saiki K. And I believe there's a second season as well, which I haven't watched yet. Right. Let's go for another modern comedy. Kaguya-sama Love is War. This is so funny. This show and the manga should not be good. It comes from a genre and a style that is like dime a dozen every season, generic high school comedy. But man, does this author know how to do it well. It is so funny. So the premise of the show is basically this guy and this girl really like each other. They're not sure if the other person likes them back, and they are too proud to admit that they like each other. So basically, they're constantly duking it out while, doing school stuff, trying to get the other person to confess. It sounds really dumb and really simple, but it is so funny. Oh my god. Even this character, who should be really irritating and really annoying. In most anime, her archetype is the most irritating character you've ever seen. But in Love is War, she is so funny. I laugh so hard watching this show. Oh my god. Absolutely love it. Top tier recommendation. Can't get enough of it. Genuinely can't get enough of it. It is Oh, and the music, yes. The opening songs are so good. I've listened to the first opening song, I swear to God, 500 times. I think, in fact, at one point, when I was doing work, I put it on because I felt like listening to it on my other machine, and I couldn't be bothered changing it, and I just let it play on loop for like 2 hours. Such a good anime, highly recommended. Let's keep the comedy train going. And again, because we're talking anime that defy the odds of their genre. Love is War defies the odds of high school comedies, because most anime high school comedies are all the same, and they're all really dull. But now we move to the isekai genre. The worst, after the harem genre, the isekai genre is the second worst genre in anime. Full of garbage. I absolutely hate the fact that isekai is popular, and that these just degenerate otakus will buy anything from an isekai anime. God, they're so bad. There's like 1,000 isekai anime, and there's like maybe 3 good ones. They're so bad. There's so much trash. However, there is Konosuba. And Konosuba is actually successful because it does not try to present itself as having some grand premise or some deep message that all isekai anime always fail to deliver on. No. It's all about comedy. Basically, this guy gets isekai'd, and he meets this girl who's a goddess, who's basically gonna, in your typical isekai, she'd give him the superpower that makes him unique from everybody else in the world. Except she's worthless. She's a complete trash goddess. Can't do anything except for like maybe spout water from her fingertips to do some water guns. She's worthless. And so as a result, this guy gets the short end of the stick amongst isekai protagonists, and basically he has to live like a bum, and she mooches off him. And then this girl comes along. She's got really powerful magic, but she runs out of power really fast. And then there's Darkness, the best character in the show. She's a total sadomasochist. She loves being beaten on in fights, specifically for the sexual angle. It is so funny. Very funny show. Highly recommended. Even if you hate isekai, you should watch this one. But yes, Darkness is by far the funniest character of the show. Not safe for work, by the way. Any scene with Darkness, 100% not safe for work. Okay. Let's go and recommend. We've done a few comedies. Let's recommend some more serious stuff. I want to recommend Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju. This is an art anime. It's all about a certain type of Japanese theater. It's like a one-man show where usually they just have like I believe it's just a fan, if I remember correctly. It's just one character on a stage with a fan, and they will perform an entire story, multiple characters, and all that. It's as Japanese a art form as you can imagine. If you think of it's like kabuki, but done way more subtle. It's like a subtle version of kabuki and done by a single person. And so the story is, you've got this guy in here. He's like a master of rakugo, and this like delinquent comes in. I think he's the delinquent at one point watches a rakugo show. I don't think he pays. I think he just sneaks in, or he's like running away from somebody. I don't exactly remember. But he gets into it and he wants to learn. And so you've got this like really severe, sincere, serious old man and this delinquent youth learning how to do one of the most serious art forms that you can get. And it's so good. It's so good. Now, many people will probably find this a very boring show because just like Rakugo itself, because it's very slow paced. When they do performances, they do the entire performance. It's not like other, it's not like when you're watching, like a sports anime where, it'll skip parts of the match or something. Now this is like, it'll play from the start and it'll play it right to the finish. But it's really strong characters. If you're looking for something serious, 100% recommend Rakugo. So good. Such a good show. One of the more recent releases over here. Let's go for another serious thing. Monster. Based on manga by my favorite manga author. Monster is so good. So the premise is this guy over here, Dr. Tenma, he's a doctor, like a surgeon, I think specifically a brain surgeon. And I think he's a brain surgeon, but he's some kind of surgeon, but I'm pretty sure it's brain because the kid he saves is a brain injury. And so one day, into his surgery comes this kid who's got who's been shot in the head. And he's about to go in and operate on the kid, but then the mayor comes in, also injured, although not injured as badly as the kid. And the mayor is a massive donor to the hospital. And so the hospital director goes, Tenma, I want you to leave the kid. You got to operate on the mayor instead. He's much more important. Tenma goes, no, the kid came in first. I don't operate based on who's richest. He came in first. I'm going to do that. So he performs the operation, saves the kid's life, gets fired. But in a tragic turn of events, the kid turns out to be a serial killer. He basically saved the life of the next Hitler. And so he makes it his life's mission to find and stop the kid whose life he saved. It's a 74 episode series, so it's quite a long one. It's quite a slow one. I would say of every anime on this list, it's the least anime of these anime. There's nothing anime about this show. It doesn't have any anime tropes. It doesn't have any anime visuals. It doesn't have any weird kind of visuals at all. There's nothing anime about this series at all. Yes, the kid does grow up. So this is the kid he saved. So if you're looking for the least anime thing on this list, Monster is the one to go for. But man, is it good. Keep in mind though, it is quite long. And so if you don't like long, slow stuff, it won't be for you. But other than that, highly recommended. Let's rapid fire a few movies. What other movies have I got on here? Have I missed any others? Oh, hang on. I already did those two. Put that away. That one, and... oh, yes, this one. Actually, no, I'll do that. I will do that one. I will do that one. And pick that classic as well. Okay. I'll leave this one for last. Ninja Scroll, Red Lion, and Vampire Entity, Bloodlust, and Wolf Children. Alright, Wolf Children. This one is for you Arknights fans out there. Because Wolf Children has got, the same kind of half animal, half people stylings as Arknights. The premise is, this woman marries a wolf man, basically. She has 2 kids, and then he dies in an accident. And it's all about her dealing with these 2 kids that are part wolf. And it's set in the real world, and she's living in normal society. And it's all about her struggles as a single mother dealing with these 2 kids. And the 2 kids are very different. Like, he's really rebellious. He's a lot more in tune with his wolf side, whereas the girl is a lot more human. Very good Very good anime. It's not a Ghibli film, but it's quite close to a Ghibli style film. So I highly recommend Wolf Children as well. Anything by Mamoru Hosoda is, well, pretty much anything by him is good and worth watching. Vampire Entity Bloodlust. This, I can't decide between Grave of the Fireflies and Vampire Entity Bloodlust as the best anime, as my favorite anime films. In terms of like, you know, cool and style, definitely Vampire Entity Bloodlust, but because of how much of an impact Grave of the Fireflies had on me, you know, there's obviously that to account for. So, Vampire Hunter. There's two films. There's an older film, which is it's okay. It's a little bit jank. The older one, definitely worth watching if you like older, more classic stuff. But Bloodlust is absolute top tier anime production quality. When you see the art and the animation and just the visual creativity for this film, it is just mind-blowing. The style is a little bit Dune meets a little bit of Dune meets Bloodborne meets Trigun. That's the basically the simplest way I can put it. And so the premise is that this woman, she gets kidnapped by a vampire, and her father hires a vampire hunter, aka D over here, to go and get her back. Now, the thing is, she wasn't kidnapped. She voluntarily went with this vampire because she's in love with him. And so the story is all about the chase. And meet all sorts of characters. There's other mercenaries. Oh, absolutely visually stunning. Visually stunning film. Audio is amazing as well. The story is really simple, but it's really effective, and it's just so good. Furthermore, I love this anime so much that I have purchased several cells of the show, because it's an old hand-drawn anime. And so I have like a half dozen anime cells from this series, and boy do I love them. So this, for me, is an absolute top tier anime recommendation. I absolutely love Vampire Entity Bloodlust. Then we've got Red Line. Now Red Line, so far, now I have not seen every single anime ever made, but I can pretty confidently say that Red Line is the best animated film, as in like the literal animation quality. You will not see it anywhere better than Red Line. It's so fluid, it's so smooth, it's like, it's hard to describe, you know, the extreme lengths they went to animate this series. The premise is basically F-Zero. If you've ever played any of the F-Zero games, that's Red Line. F-Zero the anime is not the crappy old F-Zero anime that they made back in the day. No, it's Red Line. High-speed races with like the craziest tracks, the craziest cars, the craziest characters. It's over the top, it's ludicrous. It's really, really fun. The story is kind of simple. I mean, the story itself is fine. It's just, you know, all about these races. The main flaw I would say with it is the characters are really kind of flat and weak. But the visuals and like the racing action, easily worth watching. So this is highly recommended. Even if the premise does not sound interesting to you whatsoever, absolutely watch it just for that animation alone, because man is it good. Like, you just watch 5 seconds, just watch 5 seconds of this movie and you'll see the most beautiful animation you've ever seen. Next we come to a classic, Ninja Scroll. For people who started watching anime in the West when it started to become a thing in the West, Ninja Scroll along with Ghost in the Shell were like the anime movies. They were the two movies that anybody who'd watched any anime had seen. So Ninja Scroll is basically like a much more serious Naruto, is the simplest way of putting it. You've got various characters with different powers. They've all got their own unique thing. Very Naruto-like. And this guy's basically just got to fight them all. And he's protecting the woman as well. Very simple. Very straightforward action film, but it does it really effectively. And the animation is excellent as well. It really holds up despite being so old. So highly recommend watching Ninja Scroll, especially if you're a fan of things like Naruto and you want to see, a bit more of a Naruto done a bit more seriously. I recommend Ninja Scroll. Now, if you want to lose your mind, we come to Mind Game. This is by far the weirdest anime I've ever seen. Mind Game is absolutely loopy. It is so loopy, it is a little difficult to describe. And in fact, you can't describe this film, and do it justice. God in this film is a fish with legs who smokes. Now, when I say fish, I mean a picture of a fish that's been cut out like a collage. And the arms and legs are human arms and legs. The show is a combination of Pinocchio meets Moby Dick meets whatever the weirdest, trippiest, weird-bending indie film you've ever seen. It is too difficult to describe, this film. And on top of that, it's not only the stories that are weird, the visuals are really weird. This poster looks strange. The actual film itself looks even weirder. You can't properly describe Mind Game. If you want to see the weirdest anime ever made, it's weird, but it works. That's the thing about it, is it's not terrible, because there are lots of weird anime that are just garbage, and they just feel like an insulting waste of time. But Mind Game, oh boy, is it fun. Actually, I think I can zoom this in. There we go. I can zoom that in a little bit more. Atilia, thank you for the raid. We're talking anime for a bit. Hello, Snee Pingu. Welcome. Okay. Right. What other stuff do I want to recommend? Hello, everyone. Welcome. We've done movies. Akira. I legitimately forgot Akira. I forgot. I will add it later. Remind me later. I will add Akira. I totally forgot. It would have been done with the previous set of films. I totally forgot about it. Let's go for some more action. Trigun. Trigun is a classic from the Cowboy Bebop era. It's not as good as Cowboy Bebop, but it is very much for fans of Cowboy Bebop as well. And if you want more comedy in your Cowboy Bebop, Trigun is the one for you. Basically, this guy, Vash the Stampede, and he's called the Stampede because wherever he goes, it's like a... what's it called? It's like a stampede had just come through and destroyed everything. Because he is the luckiest man alive. No bullet can touch him. And at the same time, he has a massive bounty on his head. And for every person that fails to capture him, the bounty just seems to get bigger and bigger. And so more and more people... This world is all about bounty hunters, just like Cowboy Bebop. It's all about bounty hunters. And more people are chasing him. And therefore, there's more and more gunfights, there's more and more craziness, and there's more and more destruction. So wherever he goes, people are trying to kill him to get the bounty. And because he's the luckiest man alive, nobody can touch him. And so instead, they damage everything around him. It's really fun. It's a great series, highly recommended. And despite being old, it's not as good production as Cowboy Bebop, but it has very strong production values for that age. Okay. You know what we haven't done very much of? Sport. We'll do some more sport and art type stuff. Now, there's not that much sports anime that I recommend. Haikyuu would be one of them, but I haven't finished that. So and I've not watched Slam Dunk, Slam Dunk is the next sports anime on my list to watch. Hello Uber, welcome. I have not watched Slam Dunk, and I have not finished Haikyuu, and I'm only recommending stuff that I've finished. Anything that I haven't finished, I am not going to consider, because you never know, the ending might be terrible. So the one sports anime that I do, and however, I have seen a lot of sports anime. One sport anime I really do recommend is Major. It's all about baseball. Now, I'm not really into baseball. I knew pretty much nothing about baseball before I started watching this. I think I watched one baseball game in my life while I was in Japan. And the only reason I watched it is because you don't need to speak Japanese in order to understand what's going on in a sports game. So, with Major, it's not a shonen sports anime in the same way like it's not like Haikyuu, you know, it's not a high school sports anime. It's a career sports anime. Yes, I have seen Ace of Diamond. I don't think Ace of Diamond is very good. It's kind of meh. Basically, if you want Ace of Diamond done right, you watch Major. So this starts with this guy, the protagonist, as a little kid. He's like a preschooler, and his dad is a professional baseball player. And he takes a ball to the temple from this guy over here, who's an American, who comes over and joins and plays in Japan. And I think he's a fast baller, if I remember correctly. So obviously, as the name implies, they throw very fast and very hard, and hits his dad in the temple. Gibson is his name. Dad gets concussion. They think he's okay, but I think he goes to sleep and he just doesn't wake up. You know, as happens sometimes when you get a concussion. So basically, this guy killed his dad, and he wants to become a baseball star like his father. And the series is all the way from him playing in the backyard as a little kid, looking up to his father, all the way to the major leagues. It covers, I think it's got like 6 seasons or something. It covers the whole thing from start to finish. And the father, and this guy, the blonde guy on the right, that's the son of this guy. He's like the main rival to the protagonist, because they're about the same age. And also this guy hates him, and he hates his father. And there's a whole backstory there, which I won't give away. It's really interesting. But this guy is a very important person in the protagonist's life, even though he killed his father. The dynamic is really interesting, like that story and the way the whole backstory, weaves into it. It's so it's basically like it's like a mentor. He more or less becomes like a mentor, but like on the other side, in essence, and also becomes like an inspirational figure to him. It's really fascinating. You're thinking, how the hell does that work when he killed his father? But that's the thing. It works. And they did such a good job of it. There's only one major problem with this show. And yes, the use of major was intentional in that sentence. The production quality sucks. This show, each season is like 26 episodes long. They have the budget of an 8-episode season. It's like 8 episodes of money spread out over 26 episodes. Because, man, is there just not enough animation, particularly in the early seasons. I think it's around season 3 or 4 where it picks up a bit. But when you look at those first couple of seasons, oh boy, is it like really simple. No, I have not read the manga. But, this feels like probably a perfect adaptation of of the manga. It doesn't feel like there's anything missing. Now, there is a sequel series following his son. You know, it basically starts, you know, a new story with his son who wants to play baseball. It's not as good, and you don't need to watch it. This is like a perfect beginning to end. But yes, this is easily top recommendation if you like sports anime. You don't specifically have to like baseball. I still think there's a lot that you can get out of it, even if you are not into baseball. Just don't really waste your time with the sequel, to be honest. And then for music, there's Beck Mongolian Chop Squad. So this is very simple premise. Dude wants to play rock music in a band, and it's just about their careers, you know, starting up. They play music together, they audition, they try to get, you know, a record, they go to concerts, etc., etc. Very simple premise. If you're into rock, like into Western rock, like classic Western rock, there are a million references in this show to it. The music itself is also really good. There's one kind of notable problem with this, and this brings me to a topic that I think really holds back the Japanese voice acting industry. Japan cannot voice act anything but Japanese. If they try to do any voice acting in any language but Japanese, it is almost always the worst performance you've ever heard in that language, no matter the language. Maybe they can pull off some Chinese and some Korean, because it's kind of similar to Japanese, but when you compare it to actual Korean and Chinese voice actors, it's, you know, they just get crushed. Beck, being largely about Western rock, as you can imagine, there's a lot of English talking in it. And there's a character in this show who's meant to have lived in the US for quite a while and meant to be fluent in English. And oh boy, is his English so bad. Now, I'm sure to a Japanese audience, it's like, it's fine, right? Because they can't tell. They don't know what it's meant to sound like, because English is not that common in Japan. Barely anyone speaks it. But Jesus Christ, is it bad. And it's bad even by the standards of Japanese voice acting. Like one of the worst English performances I've ever heard. So as a result, it's probably better to watch this show in dub, if you can. But that said, it is still a great anime, and I do strongly recommend it, especially if you're into music. Now, I'm not a big rock fan. I don't particularly listen to any of the bands they reference. Still loved this anime. Do I have anything else artistic left? For a completely different kind of artistic, we're going to go for Butter Come On. It's not an art show. It's just this guy's, you know, he does, I think it's calligraphy, hence the fancy font. He is from the city, and he ends up taking a break and going to the countryside. And over there, he meets this brat of a girl who won't stop leaving him, who won't leave him alone, won't stop pestering him, basically makes his life hell. But he basically loves her like his own kid, and it is so funny. It is so wholesome. It is such a great show. If you want to see country living, like, you know, classic Japanese country attitudes and mentalities and all that. Oh, it is so good, and it's mega cute. Fahrenheit, thank you for the follow. Absolute great show. And Einzelgone, thank you for the follow. If you need some wholesome goodness, you gotta go. Yes, and oh, that's right. Yes, the reason he takes the break is because he punched a critic in the face, wasn't it? Or one of the judges. He one of the judges like critiqued his work or something, criticized his work, and he just decked the dude right in the face in the gallery. And that's why yeah, that's right. It's not, he doesn't voluntarily take the break. he gets forced to take the break. And so not only does he not want to be there, he's also miserable because this girl won't stop pestering him. But yes, if that appeals to you, boy oh boy, you should absolutely go for it. Okay, I'm going to recommend something probably nobody's ever heard of, and you looking at this poster, I pretty much guarantee you 99% of people would not be interested in giving this anime a shot. But Kodocha is brilliant. So it's a classic, like, shoujo morning cartoon, right? I got recommended this by a total stranger, and he's like, you should watch this, it's really fun. I think it was recommended off the back of Sailor Moon or something like that. I can't remember what I'd mentioned. And so the what's it called? Recommended this, and I was like, okay, what is it? I'll give it a shot. And I posted in the Discord. Yeah, a little bit card captor Sakura. But basically the premise is you've got this little girl who wants to be like a singer, like a pop idol when she grows up. There, exclamation Discord to join. She wants to be a pop idol, and she sings all the time. She randomly bursts out into song. She's super energetic. She's super adorable. And then she's got to deal with this, like, pig-headed guy at school. It's very classic, like primary school stuff. It really captures the vibes and attitudes of kids. Without, at no point does it ever get creepy. It's just super fun, super wholesome. I strongly recommend the dub as well. The dub really works, and which might actually be easier to find than the original Japanese. There's quite a lot of episodes of it. You don't need to watch all of it. It's not really a continuous story type show. It's more of like an episodic, morning cartoon thing. Highly recommended. Super fun, super adorable. Yeah. It's got similar vibes to Barakamon, except not as much like crossover appeal for adults. It's more for kids, this one. Whereas this one's got the the kids and the adult factor in it. But it's got the same kind of wholesome vibes as that. Okay. We're being a little bit too wholesome. I need to make things a little more grim. Let me recommend to you Dorororo. So this anime has one of the grimmest premises you'll ever hear. Right, so this guy over here, his name is Hyakimaru, if I remember correctly. He was born to like to one of the feudal lords who controlled one of the territories of Japan back in the time when it was like split into a bunch of territories. And he makes a deal basically with the devil, saying, I'll give you anything you want, just save my province from this drought, because Japan is under severe drought. People are starving. The absolute misery across the entire country. And he makes a deal and goes, I'll give you anything you want, just save my people. And so the devil basically goes, sure, I'll do that. And what he does is he doesn't take the life of his firstborn son. He instead takes all of his organs. Now, you do need to, I think he takes all of his organs except for his brain. You do need to suspend your disbelief a little bit in how a baby survives without all of its organs. But basically, this baby is born with no skin, no eyes, it's missing its internal organs. It's like the most pitiful thing you've ever seen. It is absolutely grotesque and gruesome. Obviously, it's absolute, nightmare fuel. So the father goes, we can't let anybody find out about this. Just take him out into the battlefield and just bury him over there. Except the person who takes him away can't finish the job and just leaves him there. And so this battlefield's undertaker slash medic finds the baby and takes him in. And this medic, he makes like prosthetics and such for soldiers who are wounded in battle. That's his specialty. And so he takes in this baby and he takes care of it as best he can. And now you're obviously looking at the poster over here and you're thinking, this guy does not look anywhere near as gruesome as what I've described. How the hell is he like this? Well, here's the thing. He has the special power where he can kill, when he kills like evil people, he he basically recovers part of his organs. And so he just like, as he kills, he regenerates over time. And then this little kid is like a street rat who follows him around, and he's got the street smarts because this guy is like, you know, completely oblivious about the real world. And he can't talk for most of the show because he's got no tongue, obviously. He's got no tongue, he's got no eyes, his ears don't work. And just slowly over time, he starts to gain back the parts of his body. And oh boy, is this a great anime. Absolute top recommendation. If you haven't seen this yet, highly recommend checking it out. It's a recent release. Also got excellent music, and the I believe it's the ending theme visuals are really beautiful. But yes, very, very Sekiro vibes to it as well. The way the guy fights is very similar to the guy in Sekiro. Let's go for some other modern stuff. Devilman Crybaby, if you want more grimness. So Devilman Crybaby is got a very unique visual style. Highly recommended. Watching this show. Basically, this guy is the Devilman, this thing, and he's got to fight against these like demons that are basically taking over the world. It's a little Evangelion-like, but a bit more. It's like Evangelion, but way of like zombie apocalypse. But instead of zombies, it's like, you know, weird mutated monsters. Quite gory, quite gruesome. A lot of really disgusting imagery and disgusting concepts. Absolutely recommended. What other grim stuff can I recommend? Grim, but not quite so grim. Parasite. Parasite is a fantastic anime. So in the premise of this one is that there's these parasites, literally parasites, these little alien parasites. They come down to Earth and they take over humans. And once they take over a human, like for example, she's got a parasite inside her, they basically just control the human. They just live as the human and they can do whatever they want. And then they can also mutate and such. Protagonist, this guy over here, has a parasite into his hand, and once it reaches it's either your heart or your brain. I'm pretty sure it's your brain. It takes over. That's how it takes you over. And he manages to block it from going up his arm. So he basically cuts it off, and it's forced to attach itself just to his hand. And so he's got the parasite only in his hand, and it can mutate into like all these, you know, into like bladed weapons, and it's got all these eyeballs. There's a lot of body horror in this. If you don't like eyeballs on random spots in people's bodies, I don't recommend watching this. And basically, he is trying to deal with this alien invasion. And people don't know what's going on, obviously, because these parasites are like just stealthily sneaking in and taking over people. And very gory, lots of death. Lots of, you know, crazy stuff going on. Very enjoyable. It's also got some... What makes this show really good is that the parasites aren't just straight up evil. It's some of them obviously are just outright evil, but some of them, you know, as they integrate into society, they get a different perspective, and it's just really interesting seeing how they view things, you know. And there's obviously that argument of, you know, humans, we, you know, hunt and eat and do whatever we want on this planet of, you know, what you would consider lesser life forms compared to us, is the parasite not just doing the same thing, you know, coming from above. Next, I want to recommend, I've got 2 anime that are kind of similar. And they come from a guy who has a very unique visual style, as you can tell. Basically, the one on the right, Kaiji Ultimate Survivor, is, if you liked Squid Game, then you're going to love Kaiji Ultimate Survivor. Basically, rich people, it's a very similar premise to Squid Game. Basically, Squid Game is certainly inspired by this series. Rich people basically bet on who's going to survive and the outcomes of all these like insane games. And the participant of games obviously are people who owe a ton of money. Very similar setup to Squid Game, except it's way more insane than the Squid Game, and there's way more strategy and mind games than in Squid Game. Whereas Squid Game, it honestly felt like, for the most part, it was just luck of who succeeds and who doesn't. With a little bit of... Basically, if you're ruthless in Squid Game and you're a bit lucky, you're going to win. In this, you need to be really smart. You need to know what you're doing. And so it's really quite intense and interesting. Whoops. So this one is highly recommended. It does go on a tad long, to be honest. But... I do recommend it. Now, the visual style, the art style is not for everyone, as you can tell by the very strange character designs, but it's certainly unique. Now, this other one, Akagi, is not as good as this, but I still recommend it because it's quite unique. It's all about mahjong. This guy plays like death mahjong, is the simplest way of putting it. He goes in and he plays these mahjong games, and the bets that he makes are like, oh, if I lose this round, I'll chop off my finger. You know, those are the kinds of bets that you do. Your life is on the line for these games of mahjong. And the thing is, it plays everything with an absolute straight face, which is what it needs, because that's what makes it so entertaining. It goes all in. It's really intense. It's really crazy. It's really over the top. It's not the greatest, so I'm going to put it in the unusual area. But I do recommend it. Although Kaiji is the better one of the 2. Okay. Let's go for... something else serious. Now, I couldn't find a good poster for this, so it's a bit cut off. But... fairly recent anime, Rainbow. Man, this is a powerful series. This is like... not for the faint of heart, I'll be honest. Things get pretty grim. Things get pretty disgusting. There's a lot of abuse. There's a lot of really nasty stuff happens in this series. The story is... it follows a bunch of delinquents after World War II. So this is post-war Japan, where it's recovering. Things haven't gotten to that point where the country is like, you know, modern, and, you know, the Japan that we know today is still way off. And so obviously, you know, lots of kids without their parents died in the war, lots of delinquency, and these kids, they all, you know, get arrested for whatever reason. You know, some of them stealing food because they need to survive. Others get thrown into prison just because the police are dicks and just, you know, like beating kids up. And so they all are part of this like juvenile detention center. And the director in particular of this detention center is as evil a human as you can get, while still being very believable as a real person. Like, he's truly, truly evil. And also the head guard as well is like a psycho. And it's all about the brotherhood between these guys and just surviving in this world of absolute hell. When you see like the situation these kids live in, and the fact that it's that's what it was like at that time, you just think to yourself, man, am I glad I was not born in that era. God damn, it's rough. Very serious, very heavy anime, but if you like that kind of stuff, absolutely highly, highly recommended. All right, after that, we need something a bit more lighthearted because it's getting a bit too grim. Let's go for lighthearted in a different kind of way with Bacano. So Bacano is one of the first anime I watched when I got back into anime after having a long break from anime. There was a period where I didn't watch anything for like 5 years. And Bacano got me back into it. This anime is fantastic. The story follows, I think it's 3 groups of characters. They come from different gangs, and they're all fighting over something, and it's all centered on this train ride from, I think it's Chicago to New York or something like that. I don't exactly remember. It's been a long time since I watched this. And some of these characters also have like superpowers is sort of exaggerating a bit, but some of these characters are immortal. They're basically like vampires. And so you've got gangs of really different people, different characters. This dude over here, his name is like, isn't his Lad or something like that? I don't quite remember. Ladd or something. Absolute crazy, crazy dude. He's basically, the most similar character I could think of to him is Dio from JoJo. He's basically like Dio. Total psycho, loves to fight people. He's one of the immortals, unfortunately. And so the plot has got all these perspectives, and it's all tying in together. It's all like tying in together, you know, onto this one central focus. Hey, Box2. Welcome. We're just discussing some anime for a bit. And man, like this is so fun. And then there's these two my favorite characters are these two at the back over here, because they're like thieves, and they're the massive comic relief. The two thieves, they're great. They're kind of incompetent, but they're also really like crafty and sneaky. They're really fun. They bring this like great balance to the show because it's also quite violent and quite gory. One massive recommendation I have for this: watch it in the dub. So the Japanese sounds like a basically typical, basically, you know, typical Japanese voice work. But the dub does authentic accents for all of the characters. And so you've got all the different accents. You've got the Chicago, the New York, all that. They've got all these different accents. All the characters all have a variety of American accents, and it's fantastic. It adds so much more. It adds so much like atmosphere and style, and you know, it just makes it so much more engaging as well. So, absolutely, highly recommend Bacano. For a similar vibe to Bacano, an action series is Black Lagoon. Black Lagoon has that, you know, energetic, slightly crazy anime action vibe to it. A little bit along the line of, it's a little bit Cowboy Bebop, you know, slash Trigun slash Bacano. It's a mix of those. Revi, the protagonist, is an awesome gal, absolute shit talker. Very, very straightforward, very easy to recommend action series. It's animated well. The acting is great, whether you like it in Japanese or dub. Both are fantastic. It does, you know, your typical, you know, guns action stuff very well. But yeah, highly recommended. Now this one, Darker Than Black, is a little bit of Black Lagoon meets Escryed that I recommended earlier down here. It's a little bit of this, but with this. And so in this world, there's this dome. There's this like mysterious dome, and right next to it, people have developed like superpowers. And they've all got like their own unique ability. Some of them are really strange. It's a quite subdued for a like superpowered series. Yeah, Japanese Batman is a pretty good explanation. It's very, it's not over the top. It's not crazy. You know, it's very much like organized crime kind of vibe to it. And so things in the nearby city next to the dome don't operate quite the same. And so you've got this strange society to adapt to. It's really fascinating. The only thing is, it's kind of incomplete, where you've got the second season, which is not very good. There's also a massive time skip at one point. And it's not a time skip that works, because you kind of need to know what happened between the time skip, because like everything's completely different after the time skip, and you're thinking, how the hell did we go from here to here? It's got a massive time skip that completely changes the tone of the show, changes many of the characters as well, removes a whole bunch of the characters. It's not the same kind of show at all. However, you don't need to watch that. You just watch the first season. So yes, I highly recommend this. For some more action stuff, I'm actually going to put all three of these out at once. So we've got Full Metal Panic as a franchise. I haven't finished Demon Slayer, so I'm only recommending stuff that I've finished. So there's a Full Metal Panic franchise. Now there's 3 seasons, and then there's a spin-off series for Mofu on the side. The third season, I'm not putting in the recommendation. Frankly, you don't even really need to watch it. The third season is kind of dull. It's just mediocre, and it's a bit of a letdown compared to what came before it. So you've got the first season. The premise of the show is Sagara, this guy over here, easily one of my favorite characters in anime, voiced by my favorite voice actor, Tomokazu Seki. He is a military guy. He works for this mercenary organization called Mithril, and their job is basically keeping world order, specifically controlling this like special super advanced technology that is created from the minds of these people called Whispered. Basically, people are born with like the ability to, like they know the blueprints essentially to create really advanced technology. So like this woman over here, she is one of those. And this girl over here, the high school girl, she is also one of those, and she doesn't realize it. Now the Mithril obviously figures it out, and they send in this guy to protect her, like, you know, because he's roughly the same age. He needs to go into high school and basically be her bodyguard without her knowing about it. Because there's also terrorists, one of the coolest villains in anime, trying to capture her so that they can basically pick her brain apart and get the technology for themselves. Here's the twist on the story, though. This guy is absolutely amazing when it comes to military stuff. You know, nobody will beat him in a gunfight. However, when it comes to ordinary life things, he is well and truly the most incompetent person you've ever seen. The dude is grade A spastic when it comes to real life. And the whole... So early on, the show is mostly about him pretending to just be an ordinary student and absolutely failing because he is completely incompetent at being ordinary, just being a normal person, and her having to deal with all the mess and trouble that he causes. And then eventually, obviously, the terrorists get involved, and then it turns into an action series. There's really cool mech designs, some really good action series, good action scenes. There's also some really strong villains and strong heroes as well. Then, so the first season is like 50-50 comedy action, like comedy and serious action. The second season gets a lot darker. It starts to deal with things like, the realities of war, the PTSD. Sagara has to deal with the fact that it starts to hit on him that he's like not a normal person because of his upbringing as a child soldier. He's just got no concept of what it is to be ordinary. And basically this girl, who, obviously there's a romance between them eventually, is like the one thing that like keeps him grounded, basically. And so it starts to get pretty dark and serious in the second season. And you've also got the spin-off season, Full Metal Panic Fumofu. This one is pure comedy, and no anime has made me laugh harder than Full Metal Panic Fumofu. If you watched the Marble stream the other week, where I basically died of laughter, that was me pretty much non-stop watching this show for the first time years ago. God, it was funny. If you've seen my Discord profile image, which I've had unchanged for basically since I created Discord, is obviously this little mascot. Inside here is Sagara. You can't really explain comedy, so I don't want to explain it, but basically I just find it absolutely hilarious. Oh man. Yes, in my one he's holding a shotgun, and it's an amusement park. So this is the mascot for an amusement park, for a children's amusement park. And he goes around with a shotgun because this is the only disguise he can find to infiltrate an amusement park. But yes, absolutely love this franchise. Now I'm going to put them all together at the top tier, but really the two top is season 2 and Fumofu. But I'll just put them all together because it's much simpler that way. There and there. Also, there's quite a few creepy villains in the second season. Just seeing that this dude over here, ugh, and these two women, ugh, God, they're creepy. But yes, top recommendation on the entire Full Metal Panic series. Okay, let's do something that is not Japanese. So, now I'm going to butcher this pronunciation because I don't speak Chinese, but the Chinese name is Modao Zushi, and the English translation is Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. This is the first Chinese anime that I've watched that was actually good. I've seen quite a few Chinese anime, and for the longest time, they were pretty much all garbage. But this one is excellent. This guy up here, he's the Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, basically. He is, to put it simply, he is like a great evil necromancer inside the body of like an innocent, playful man. Now, he doesn't really, I don't think he's aware of what he really is, or I think he is in part, but he's not really sure of how evil he can be. And this guy is from this like monastery where they, train in like, basically like a training monastery. The grander premise of the show is there's these different, it's a little bit Avatar actually. When you hear the premise, it's a little bit like Avatar, except the Avatar is evil, basically. So there's these like 5 nations / provinces in this fictional China, and one of them, basically, aka the Fire Nation, starts to take over the others. And but this guy, the necromancer, basically, he fights them. However, he fights them in an evil way. And so it's got a little bit of Game of Thrones to it in terms of the politics, with some Avatar. And obviously, as you can tell by the art style and the character designs, layered in boys' love. You know, classic boy, Bishonen stuff. But yeah, highly recommended. Oh, and I should mention, absolutely gorgeous as well. Really, really beautiful anime to look at, and the music is fantastic too. So yes, this is like the one Chinese anime where it's like, if you're gonna watch one Chinese anime, Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation is my recommendation. Absolutely top notch. Let's go for something a little bit older, something that's more people need to watch. This is Kino's Journey. Now there's two versions. There's the old and there's the remake. 100% go for the old. The remake, while it technically looks better, and the old is a little simple in the animation quality and the production values, the new completely loses the atmosphere and the tone and the feel of what makes Kino's Journey so good. So Kino's Journey is about Kino just going around on a bike, traveling the land, and just meeting different people in different places. It's got a little bit of a Star Trek vibe to it in that sense, where the different places that they go to is just, you know, a different type of culture, different type of people, different moral question to deal with, that sort of thing. Really, really, really engaging. If you like that very quiet, very thoughtful, slow-paced type story, Kino's Journey absolutely deserves to be watched by all, and quite frankly, not enough people watch this anime. Top recommendation. Let's go back into some sci-fi. I'm sure everybody's heard and seen this. In fact, I should have probably done this at the start in the popular section. And in fact, I've noticed another popular anime that I completely missed from the start. Psycho Pass. Psycho Pass, basically, if you love Ghost in the Shell, you're going to love Psycho Pass. It's got a similar kind of world to it. The premise of Psycho Pass is that crime has essentially been solved for the most part. There's a system, a central AI machine that, through a bunch of algorithms and human analysis and all that, has figured out who's going to be a criminal. It's a bit Minority Report in that sense. And if you do become a criminal, then the system knows it, and then it sends in these enforcers who basically go and take you out. Now, if you're too far gone, they just outright kill you. If you're not that far gone, they might put you in like a center. And if you're only slightly gone, you become an enforcer yourself. Because, quite cleverly, this show takes into account that trauma can affect you mentally in negative ways. So, for instance, in the very first episode, this woman is, I believe she's either raped or she's just attacked in the first episode. And the thoughts of revenge and hatred for the person who attacked her basically turns her, according to the system, into a criminal. It's like, you're mentally too far gone, you are now a criminal because of that. And so it's this very extreme system. But there is peace and the society functions. So the question is it better to live in a society like that, or is it better to live in a free society with more crime? And so it goes into a whole bunch of philosophical questions. It's got a great world. Music is fantastic. Performances are great. Obviously, absolutely great anime. It's not as good as Ghost in the Shell, though. But easy recommendation. I'm going to do some Gundam, because it wouldn't be anime recommendations without... Oh yes, something about Psycho Pass I should mention. Just watch the first season. Anything past that is a waste of time. So with Gundam, we've got two series. And these are basically for the two different types of Gundam. So, for the uninitiated to Gundam, it's a massive, massive franchise. Hugely interconnected. It makes the Marvel Universe look really simple by comparison. There are two timelines in Gundam. You've got the Universal Century, which is the main line, and then you've got the... I can't remember what the other one stands for. But the others, I can't remember what it's called. The other one. So you got the Universal and you got the other one. The mainline stuff is the more serious political stuff. Whereas the offshoots, they're all standalone stories. They're a bit more, how do I put it? Like, a bit more pop, basically. And they're much simpler to follow. You don't need, there's no like crazy complex politics. There's no million characters to think about. You don't need to have watched 1,000 of the other things. Basically, you've got the main line, which is the more complex stuff, and then you've got all the offshoots. And the offshoots can do whatever they want, basically. They don't have to be tied in any way to the main line. Whereas the main line is like, right, this is sacred. You're not allowed to screw with it. You're not allowed to mess with it. You know, it's really like strongly regulated, basically. So my recommendations for each of the two different types, Gundam Seed for the offshoot stuff, and Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin, which is a remake of the original series, for the mainline stuff. Now, Gundam Seed, just the first season. Second season is basically retreading most of the same material for whatever reason, and has the most annoying protagonist in anime. So I do not recommend the second season at all. Complete waste of time. This one, there's like a planet or a space station. It's not a planet. It's a space station that's a bit like Switzerland, basically. And they get attacked. They escape on this fancy new ship that has these fancy new mechs, and they're basically defending themselves from the enemy while trying to get to friendly territory again. And the dude in blue, he's the protagonist. He's on this ship. He pilots the fancy mech because he's like genetically modified. In this world, there's like genetically modified people. They're basically like the aliens of this world, and they're discriminated against by the humans. And he's fighting on the human side, but technically not. He's technically on neutral, from that neutral territory, but the ship that he's on is a human ship. And then on the other side, there's his childhood friend who is like one of the, he's also genetically modified, and he's pilots the main opposing mech, and they got to battle each other. It's really good. It's got a really good cozy vibe to it, of like a crew traveling in a ship. A little bit of that Star Trek stuff, but if you want it to be like, much more action focused. It's got some great characters as well. I really like the girl with the pink hair, Lacus. She's like a pop star who uses her popularity and fame to influence people in the war. And it's a really interesting subplot with her. Gundam Suit The Origin. The Origin, now this is completely different. This is like, it's a bit hard to explain, but basically you've got factions at war. There's mechs involved, people making, new weapons of war. There's like great leaders on both sides. There's evil leaders on both sides. There's psychos everywhere in between. And the original series followed a young protagonist like most Gundam series, but the Origin refocuses it to be from the perspective of Char, who's one of the, technically a villain, but most of the villains in mainline Gundam are not really villains. They're just people on the other side, right? It's one of those kinds of things. And he was like one of the main guys on the other side. He's more of like an anti-hero. And so when you follow him here, he is still the same character, but he's the protagonist. He's the hero. He's more of an, he's an anti-hero in that sense. And just all the politics, all the craziness that goes on, and all the scheming that this guy does, absolutely fantastic. So this one, for me, gets an absolute top recommendation. Now, I'm running out of space, so I'll just put you over there. There's a whole bunch of great Gundam, but these are basically my two starter recommender. These are the two that I recommend starting with. There's, Iron-Blooded Orphans, if you want something, offshoot. Then you've got, Collison has mentioned 8th MS Team. That's a really good, very small, focused story on a unit, in guerrilla warfare in a jungle. Bunch of great stuff. Let's do... my favorite anime director of all time. Satoshi Kon. Now, I hope I have not missed any of his stuff. I've missed Tokyo Godfathers. Tokyo Godfathers would actually go into high, but there was quite a bit, so I thought I would cut a little bit of it. Okay, we're going to start with... What do I want to start with? I'm going to start with Paprika, because that's the craziest one of them all. Whoops. Paprika is basically, if you took Inception and you made it absolutely insane. So it's all about going into dreams and people's minds and all that. But where Inception took it, handled it as a very serious heist film, where the dream world was more about it was really more about physics bending in Inception. In Paprika, it is full on just psychedelic imagination, just off the walls. It is such a cool film. Visually stunning, really creative. Oh man, highly recommended film. This is just so fun. If you like the weird and the wonderful, definitely recommend Paprika. If you want something completely different, then you've got Millennium Actress. Now, Millennium Actress is all about this woman who's, quite old at the start of the film, and her, she was obviously an actress throughout her life, very famous, very big actress, and the company that she mostly worked with is shutting down, so a journalist goes, you know what, nobody's talked to her in a while, let's go and interview her about, about her life. And so the interview is told through scenes from her films. So a whole life story is incorporated into scenes from her films, with the interviewer and I think the cameraman sort of worked into the scenes as extras in the movie. And it's really fascinating. It's just a strong character study. And again, as usual from Satoshi Kon, the directing is absolutely top notch. However, I don't find it to be as strong as his other stuff. So I would put it into high recommendation. Still absolutely. Remember, everything here is stuff that I really like. So this is a high, but I'm not putting it at the top as I would most of his other work. Then, now this one over here, Memories, is technically not all Satoshi Kon. Satoshi Kon is only involved in one of the films. These are 3 short films in one. I think they're half an hour each. He was involved in just one of them, but it's definitely the best one. It's a short story called Magnetic Rose, and it's about the salvage crew that goes up to this space mansion. Basically, if you think of a space station, but it's a mansion, and it's the most opulent, Gothic style, classical, practically a castle, and it's abandoned, and they go in there to check it out. However, it's also haunted by this spirit of this woman, and it's... I don't really want to give anything away. It's just really effective, really simple horror. So I definitely recommend that. For me, the Magnetic Rose is absolutely fantastic. The other 2, one is called Stink Bomb, if I remember correctly, and basically this place that's using experimental weapons, a gas bomb basically goes off and people just keep dying. I won't give away the story to it because it's quite funny. It's pretty good. And then the third one, I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically about this world where you just wake up and you just work for the great machine of war, It's not that great. I think it's okay, but yes, highly recommend Magnetic Rose, and Stink Bomb is quite fun. So I'm putting this up here really for the just for the Satoshi Kon bit. Then we've got Paranoia Agent, which I think is probably his weakest work. Still good, obviously, but I would say it's his weakest work. In this town, there's people report that there's this kid who rides around on roller skates with a baseball bat, and he's just beating people. And it becomes this like crazy psychosis in this town. People start to go mad at the stories and the sightings and all that. It's all about, as the title implies, it's all about paranoia and insanity. And like, there's a strong possibility that the kid is not even real, and everybody's just imagining the same thing. It's one of those kinds of stories, and so I do recommend checking it out. The opening song, at minimum, you should watch the opening credits, because that is wild and really weird. Then we come to Perfect Blue. Up there as one of my favorite anime films of all time. I watched this film for the first time when I believe I was 14 years old. And now, if you've seen Perfect Blue, you should know that no 14-year-old should watch this film. It is horrific. Now, I say that in like a good movie kind of way. It very much taps into the obsession with Japanese idols, like the pop idols, the ones that do the music, the singing, the dancing, and all that. And it is, to this day, when you watch Perfect Blue and you hear about the stories, things that happen in real life, like recently there was big drama with one of the VTubers, got found out to have been dating someone, and people just lost their marbles. Yeah, this film is basically about that sort of thing. So this woman, she was an idol, and she decides to stop being an idol and to go into film and like do like more serious adult film. She wants to become like a proper actress rather than something for like basically a teenage girl on parade. And one of her fans, the roller skates one is called Paranoia Agent. And so one of her fans basically doesn't take kindly to the fact that she's no longer this perfect idol that, let's be real, jacks off to every night. And things start to get really, really, really crazy and deranged. And what Satoshi Kon is so good at doing is just getting in your head and making you question everything that you're seeing on screen. And his directing style, his cinematography is just unparalleled when it comes to anime films. He's by far the best anime director that we've ever had. And it is such a tragedy that we lost him so soon. Because man, he was, he had so much more to give. But yeah, Perfect Blue, easily his best work, easily my most recommended film of his. You should absolutely go and watch Perfect Blue. Okay, we are seriously running out of space, but we're also near the end. All right, to get a little bit away from the grim darkness of Satoshi Kon, let's look at something. The visuals are screwed up on this one as well. Now, unlike Evangelion, this is not this image coloring is not appropriate. This one is very similar to Kino's Journey. It's very quiet, very introspective. It's examination of life, of character, of peace, and it's done through this guy who's like it's like an exorcist, basically. Well, he's not really an exorcist, but similar. He basically investigates these things called mushi. They're basically like little spirits, and they just do stuff. Like they're making someone sick, they're messing with a town or whatever, and he just goes in and he just investigates, and it's really quiet, really contemplative. There's nothing bad in terms of like, there's nothing grotesque or violent or anything like that. It's just really good, wholesome, calming, like just if you need to relax. Oh boy, Mushishi. Fantastic anime to watch. Highly recommended. There are multiple seasons. It's very episodic as well, so you don't need to watch the whole thing. You can just watch one episode at a time whenever you feel like it. For another comedy, Watakoi, Love is Hard for an Otaku. This is a adult comedy romance, basically about a bunch of nerds, and that's basically all you need to know. Most of them work together, and they just go out, have fun. They play games. They're super nerdy. There's lots of game and anime references. One of the scenes is like where she's deciding what to say in response to somebody. It's treated like a turn-based battle system where she's got to make the choice and all that. There's lots of those types of game references. Super wholesome, super funny. Absolutely highly recommended. I think we might be able to make some space if I start dragging everything down. But we're near the end, so at this point, we're just going to... Can I just box this off? It's fine. No, give me back my cursor. Deselect. How the... Alright, let's put that up there. Okay. Yeah, very wholesome, very easy to watch. Very much recommended for fans of like Love is War and what's it called? Like Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun. Always good. Now for the funniest anime I've ever seen, we've got Madoka Magica. I'm kidding. This anime is not funny at all. Madoka Magica, the only anime to feature a lolly that isn't shit. So this one, it takes the magical girl genre and it goes, well, if you did really have these magical girls fighting this evil all the time, it would be far more dangerous and far grimmer than what you see in Sailor Moon. And so in this one, in order to become a magical girl, you get given one wish granted. In exchange, you become a magical girl. The part that they don't tell you is that you're basically like a slave for life fighting the darkness, fighting the evil creatures. And so this gets really quite grim, quite dark. It's not like mega grim dark, but when you come from Sailor Moon and you go to Madoka Magica, you realize, yeah, this is pretty... The system that they're trapped in is pretty damn evil. So, it's a very interesting take on the magical girl genre. It did spawn a whole bunch of clones, so there's a whole ton that are similar to Madoka Magica. None of them are any good. There's also several movies. You don't need to watch them. Just the main series is all you need. It's completely fine. The one thing I don't like is I don't think the character designs are very good. I've made it very clear. I think lollies are hideous, and this doesn't do very much to fix that opinion of mine. The only thing is, the story, the characters are really good, and it's got really good environmental designs, especially in like the villains basically have like their own realm type thing, and they always look really interesting. Now for some wholesome girls shoujo content, we come to Fancy Lala. Now, this is a similar vein to Kodocha, although for a slightly older audience. This is an anime that tragically was struck down from history because the same time this came out, Cardcaptor Sakura also released. And Cardcaptor Sakura was massive. And it totally overshadowed this series. So the premise of this one is that I said series, not Siri. Stop answering me. The premise of this one is that this little girl, she finds this magic diary, I think. And if I remember, it's a magic diary, and it turns her into this like teenage idol singer, and her dream is to just be an idol singer. And it's, you know, there's not that much more to it. But what makes it really good is that it doesn't just go, okay, she can become this idol, and then let's just go, you know, and have her do whatever she wants, and there's no real consequences or any real story to it. No, there's a proper plot. There's consequences. She suddenly becomes a teenager, and she now needs to learn about what it's like to be a teenager, and she also becomes a singer, and so she needs to learn about what it's like to be a professional and all that. So it's really teaching, well, it's teaching kids about, you know, what it's like to grow up, and it's just really good. Lots of very effective life lessons. Great show for girls. Although, you know, if you like a little bit of shoujo stuff, I can definitely recommend this. Some people might mention a similar anime called something Full Moon, Dreaming of the Full Moon or something like that. I don't remember what it's called. That has a similar premise to this, except the girl is dying in that one. That anime sucks. It's just cry porn about a girl who's dying of throat cancer, and so she gets her final wish of becoming a singer. It's just a tedious anime that just pretends to be deep by making the girl terminally ill. You know, Mystery Illness X kind of story. It's terrible. But Fantasy Lala is great and highly recommended. Okay, we're down to very close. No, not Your Lie in April. Much older than Your Lie in April. It's about singing, not the piano guy. Yeah, there's no piano guy in the one I was. It's called something Full Moon, like wishing on the full moon or something like that. One I should have done ages ago, or I should have done at the start, is Death Note. Highly recommend this one as well. The plotting and the skill with which the characters and the back and forth is executed is absolutely masterful in this show. Death Note is just about a perfect anime for 24 episodes, if I'm remembering correctly. Then it goes into what is essentially like a second season, but still technically part of season 1, and it really goes downhill. It doesn't become terrible, except for the ending is kind of crap, but I still absolutely love this anime and put it in the top because what it does well, it does so bloody well. And oh man, like when you just study how they showed the different characters' personalities and how it's an excellent example of a show don't tell anime. It's so good, and then that second season is really weak. And there's also a one-shot manga that came out, like, I think last year or maybe the year before, where the Death Note returns and some guy gets and he puts it up for auction and all the different superpowers around the world bid for it. It is, honest to goodness, one of the worst pieces of writing I've ever read in my life. That Death Note, you know, one-shot sequel manga is atrocious. And then you've got the Netflix film. That is so bad, it's hilarious. After you watch the Netflix anime, you should absolutely watch the film. It will make you cry with laughter with how bad it is. Okay, hang on. Here's another popular. I don't know how I didn't notice this because I couldn't read the title and how small the thumbnail was. Steins Gate. Pretty clear favorite anime for many people. Hugely popular. Goes without saying, this is an absolute excellent anime. Highly recommend. Top recommendation from me. Basically Terminator, if instead of, you know, a badass woman with a gun fighting the Terminator, it's a bunch of nerds fighting the Terminator. Well, fighting Skynet, not the Terminator. It's really good. You know, there's not much I can say. The music is fantastic. The singer who does the opening song for each of the seasons is just phenomenal. I think she did a song for Arknights as well, if I remember correctly. So yeah, top recommendation for Steins Gate. No surprise there. Let's go for something a little older. Vision of Escaflowne, or just Escaflowne, or Escaflowne, some people say. I'm not really sure which one's correct, because the Flone part might just be the bad Japanese pronunciation. I don't know. This is back when Isekai was actually good, before Isekai was a genre. This girl, as you can tell by her high school uniform, comes from the real world, and at one point, this guy busts into the real world, like through this portal, and he fights off this like dragon, and then she gets taken, when he leaves, she gets taken with him into this fantasy world where there's war going on, where his kingdom, which is like a small kingdom, is being attacked by essentially the Empire. You know, what you typically think of as the Empire from most fantasy and sci-fi, and he's got to fight them off. Now, he has a couple of advantages on his side. A, he's not entirely human. B, she has this magic pendant that allows her to sense the future, like the very near future, and so she can give warnings to him for when he's about to get attacked. And one of my favorite things about this series is the design of the mechs. So it's a fantasy world, but they've managed to get mechs in it that are like really mechanical. And it's like a bunch of pulleys and levers and, you know, very, very steampunk in the way the mechs function. And what powers them is like the heart of a dragon, which is why he was fighting the dragon at the start. The dragons have this like giant ruby looking heart, and you put it in and it enhances the user inside, and that's what allows them to move the massive mech with their movements. So it's like a one-to-one movement type thing. It's highly recommended anime. Pat Labor. The original series I don't think has aged very well at all. The humor is extremely outdated. The movies I haven't seen. And I do know the movies are very different. Okay, what else? Let's stick with the mechs. I'm gonna recommend Razafon. Now, Razafon is similar to Evangelion in many ways. It was made by basic close friend and collaborator of the same guy who made Evangelion. They basically had like discussed the same idea and then took it into completely different directions. So the difference between this and Evangelion is this one is a lot more, and I'm afraid this may give a little bit too much away of the show, but there's no simpler way of putting it. This is a lot more like The Matrix than it is like Evangelion. This is like if you took the concept of The Matrix, but you did it in a mecha anime skin like Evangelion. It's also not as dark and as grim as Evangelion. It's a lot more, how do I put it? It's a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Spiritual is not quite the right word. It's a lot more majestic, a lot more grand. There's a bit more, again, not religion is not the right word, but it's a bit more mythology to it. The mech is absolutely awesome. You know, it's called the Razafon, obviously. Obviously based on the god Ra from Egypt. And this kid, he grew up at the start of the series, he's in Tokyo. And in the world that he lives in, most of the world has been destroyed. Like, they got attacked by these like alien constructs that have destroyed most of the world, and Tokyo is pretty much the only thing left. And then one day, there's a train accident, and he finds out that actually the name of the series is Razaphon. Rahexephon. A bit of a random spelling. I'll type it in the chat just so you can get the spelling. So in comes this woman who basically says, yeah, your whole world is a lie, right? Similar, like the Matrix, like Trinity in the Matrix. She comes and goes, your whole world is a lie. There is an entire world out there beyond Tokyo. And she takes him, I won't give away all the details, but basically, he ends up escaping the bubble that is surrounding Tokyo, and he realizes that Tokyo is actually in this giant dome that looks like Jupiter. They call it the Jupiter Dome, if I recall correctly. It's been a long time since I watched this. And he realizes, actually, everything was a lie, and the evil is inside that dome. He was living in the land of the evil, and everybody in there is basically just being contained and controlled by the enemy. And so it's all about dealing with that, because he is also, obviously he's the pilot of the mech, so he's basically the chosen one in that sense. And so they send things out from the dome to try and get him back. And they're also trying to wipe out the rest of humanity. So there's a huge amount of themes to do with music and sound. And the soundtrack in Razaphon is easily one of the best that has ever been made for anime. It is such a good soundtrack. So for me, this gets top recommendation. I am completely out of space without covering up something else. So I think we're gonna have no choice. We're gonna need to start moving things down. I should really just shift click all the layers on the side, but I'm pretty sure that they're not stacked in the right order. Right. And then I'm going to I'll shrink that a bit since there's no text to read, and we'll put it down over there. But we're nearly done. So this is the, for those who are, Atelier, I think you've kind of missed it. This is top and this is high over here. There's no low tier. There's no low tier. I'm only recommending stuff that I like. Go for something, another thing that's a little bit older. Now this is, of the anime that I recommend here, this is definitely not one of the best. Like overall, it's not one of not one of the best anime, but I really like the style and the setting of it. It's also got great music. So Bubblegum Crisis, Tokyo 2040. Now there's 2 Bubblegum Crisis series. This is the newer one, which I recommend over the older. I also own cells of this anime. So for me personally, I love this anime, but it is not one of the best. It's very simple, very straightforward. These 4 women who are in these Iron Man type suits basically fight bad guys. It's got a very, cyberpunk / meets rock setting and theme. This girl, Priscilla, she's a rock star, and this absolute smoker of a woman is the leader of the gang. She funds the whole thing, and they just go around fighting bad guys, ride motorcycles, all that cool stuff. But it's just very, very straightforward. But I absolutely love it, and I do have a couple of cells from that series as well. Let's see. Let's do Gungrave, something that's based on a video game. So, Gungrave is based on a video game of the same name. Now, the original video game is basically like it's a Devil May Cry style game. You basically play as this dude who's like a bit like a Frankenstein's monster, and he is just taking revenge on all the people that were part of the organization that he belonged to, and that's it. Right? Very simple premise for a game. The anime basically the second half of the anime is the game, but the first half is the backstory, the prequel, and the first half is the part that I really, really like about this series. So it's essentially if you took The Godfather meets anime meets Devil May Cry. That's the best way I can sum up this series. So the first half, these two guys, they're like street thugs. You know, they live on the street. They got nothing going for them, and they end up joining this organization called Millennium, which is, you know, like the Godfather's gang, and they climb up the ranks. You know, brothers back to back, fighting their way through everything. The thing is, Brandon, the guy on the left, he is super loyal to Harry, the guy on the right. Harry is mega ambitious. And he wants to become the Godfather one day. And he eventually does get that opportunity, but there's, you know, he sacrifices a lot on the way. And so the story is all about their rise through the ranks and how it changes them as people, how it changes them as characters. So the first half is a lot more drama, and then the second half, it just goes into full-on anime action. It's really good action, but the first half is the part that I really like. So this gets a top recommendation from me. I'm going to put it over here where I've actually got some space. I'm just going to put a box around the unusual afterwards once we're done with all of them. All right, we're down to, I think, like the final 10. Death Parade. This is another fairly recent one. If you like psychological stuff and series that examine like humans and the human condition and psychology and morality, this is the show for you. It takes place in this bar that is more or less limbo, you know, after people die, and the patrons of this bar will test people to see where they deserve to go in the afterlife. And it's all about testing the morality and seeing who they really are as people, right? Do they have regrets in life? You know, if they were a criminal, if they got here because of, you know, their own actions, what do they think of themselves? Do they regret anything? Would they, you know, if they could say something to the people they affected throughout their lives, what would they do? All that good stuff. It's fantastic. And the music as well, particularly the opening song, is so good. There's only one negative with this show, and that is the second episode explains the whole premise and the show to you when you don't need the explanation. Like, it's one of those things where it's better to just leave things unsaid, and it can't help itself but explain it, just in case you didn't understand the premise and the question of morality and the human condition of the show. And it's like, why? It just repeats the first episode. It has like a case of you know, these people in limbo, and then the second episode is explaining what happened in the first episode. And I don't know why. It just doesn't need it. It's honestly one of the worst, like amongst great shows, it is one of the worst episodes I've ever seen of a show. But still, top recommendation from me. Another series. Now, I couldn't find an image that better summarized this anime than this image right here. So this is from an anime called Nodame Cantabile. It's about music. This guy is a music prodigy. He's really talented at multiple instruments, and he wants to become a conductor. And this girl over here, she is a absolute savant at the piano. But she has absolutely no discipline or training or anything like that. And she's a total loony. This guy's a complete control freak, a clean freak. She's an absolute disgusting slob. She's got the most filthy place I've ever seen. I would not be caught dead in her place. And the dynamic between these two, easily one of the best couples in anime. Boy, is it so fun. It's a great comedy series. Lots of music to it as well. They travel to several places around the world. Also voiced by Tomokazu Seki, my favorite voice actor. And man, it is so fun to watch. Very similar in tone to Love is War. So if you liked stuff like Love is War, then you will absolutely love Nodame. Where can I kind of fit? It's a bit wide. So we're going to put this over here. Okay. We'll go for this one. Now, this looks like trash. Not gonna lie. You look at that art style and you're like, those character designs, you're like, could it be any less interesting? Could it look any less like trash? And you're almost right. It's based on a visual novel, which pretty much tells you all you need to know. However, it manages to defy the odds by actually being good. By having good character writing and some really solid, hard-hitting drama. So the premise is this guy goes out on a date. So it's a love triangle type story, but it's like taken to a pretty dramatic conclusion. So there's this guy. The girl with the blue hair, really likes him, and these two girls are friends. This girl with the brown hair, she also, or orange hair, she also likes this guy. Now, the blue-haired girl is a really good friend to this other girl, so she's like, okay, I will, not pursue the guy, not go out with him, and I'll try and help you set you up with him. And it succeeds, right? She sets her up with the guy, and they start dating, but she gets quite jealous, and I believe it's for her birthday. She asks him out to hang out, just as friends, but obviously, deep down she wishes it was more than just friends. However, he's already organized a date with this girl, and she goes, "Oh, well, can you at least hang out for a little bit beforehand, And I believe she's about to confess to him what she really thinks of him, right? Because so far she's passed it off that she just sees him as a friend and that she's happy that these two are dating. However, while she's holding him up and this girl is waiting, there's an accident and this girl is severely injured and she falls into a coma, right? And she wouldn't have been there if this girl hadn't held him up. And it completely crushes this guy. He goes into a full downward spiral of depression. It gets really dark, really grim, really depressing. And he just lives life, like a dead man, like the living dead. And eventually, she manages to break him out of his daze. And so then a relationship starts between them. And it's all about the guilt and, the emotions and is he responsible? Is he not responsible? Is she responsible? Etc., that sort of thing. And I won't give away anything further, but it's pretty heavy drama. It's really, I really like it. Visually, it's nothing to write home about. And what's it called? And the audio as well is not spectacular. It's fairly standard production, but the writing is pretty solid. The writing is solid. The drama is really effective, and like, you know, it really managed to pull off what it's trying to accomplish. Okay, let's lighten things up a little bit with one of my favorite anime that isn't that great. The Oh My Goddess franchise. Now, there's a lot to Oh My Goddess. There's, you know, several series. There's the original OVA, then there's a few seasons. I'm specifically recommending the movie because the movie is gorgeous, and it's all about, again, it's basically just a simple love story between an ordinary dopey mortal and this absolute 10 out of 10 stunner goddess. So the premise is that this guy, Misato, you know, I don't have an image of him, but he's really short. He's a self-described manlet, right? He's like 5 foot tall or something, like 5'4", or, you know, he's shorter than most women, and as a result, he basically sees himself as never being able to get a date, to get a girlfriend, and so he's also kind of pushed around a bit by his upperclassmen. So at university, he lives in this dorm, in this boys' dorm, and on the weekend they go out partying one night, and they say, you need to stay here and you need to look after the place, right? Now, I don't know why they can't just lock up, but he's not allowed to leave. And so while he's there doing nothing, he gets hungry and he can't go out, so he decides to order pizza. He dials the phone, and it, for whatever reason, reconnects his call up into heaven through the goddess helpline. And Belldandy answers, and then 2 seconds later, she comes out of his mirror. Yeah, that's right. Belldandy travels through mirrors. Yes. She comes out of his mirror and she goes, right, I'm a goddess. I'll give you, you know, it sounded like you were in need of help. I'll give you any wish you want. And this dude is like, this is obviously, you know, my dorm mates are playing a prank on me. They play pranks on me all the time. They're probably, you know, got a hidden camera somewhere, and they're like, aha, look at this loser. He thinks he can get this 10 out of 10 girl. There's no way he's going to be able to get her. So he just thinks it's all a joke. He goes, okay, all right, I wish for you to be my girlfriend. And bam, wish granted. And so she now needs to live on Earth. Obviously, she's a goddess, so she's got to adjust to life while he's going to university. It's super wholesome. It's super, you know, feel good. Like it's a mega feel good show. And then eventually, you know, she's got 2 sisters, Erd and Skuld. Now, obviously, the 3 goddesses are named after the goddesses of past, present, and future from Nord mythology. And yeah, and there's all sorts of, you know, magical hijinks. There's some great comedy. Now, the things I specifically recommend is either the original OVA or season 1 of the show, because they kind of cover. Season 1 is just an expanded version, and then the movie. Now, I don't recommend the movie straight away. You can watch it, and it's perfectly fine, but the movie is designed with you having already, if you already know the premise of the show. The movie's like a, you know, what's going on all these years later. The second season of the show is kind of just filler, and I don't think they made any more after that. And the manga is complete. It goes on for quite a while. So I do also really like Oh My Goddess, and Belldandy is absolutely one of my favorite characters. And the character design in this series is just gorgeous. You can't dial directly. You get randomly chosen by fate. They have this giant supercomputer machine called Yggdrasil that determines who is worthy of getting connected to the goddess helpline. Okay, next I'm going to recommend a small favorite of mine that this will not be to everybody's taste. I don't think most people who watch this will find it very interesting. It's very slow. It's very subdued. There's really not that much going on in Aka 13. The premise is this guy, he works for the Investigation Bureau, and their job is basically to go around the 13 territories of the kingdom and just make sure everything is okay to maintain the peace. And there's rumors of a developing coup to overthrow the king. And so he's going around to the different territories to figure out what's going on. And now it sounds like it's really like, you know, with that kind of premise, it sounds like, oh God, there's going to be all this like politics and subterfuge and all that. No, it's mega chill. He goes to one land where everybody's really tall, and you know, one of the territories, everyone's really tall, and so all their stuff is much bigger. A loaf of bread, like, you know, one slice for a loaf of bread is like the size of a dinner plate. There's a really funny moment where they ask him, you know, how do you like your toast in the morning for breakfast when he's staying at the hotel? And he goes, can you make it extra thin, please? And at this point, you don't know why he says that. And then when it cuts to the next day, he's got a slice of toast that's like huge, but because it's really thin, it's enough for him to eat. There's another place where they've got no technology allowed, so everybody's dressed like Minutemen, and the equivalent of his mobile phone is like an absolute fascination to everyone. Yeah, it's really relaxing show. I love the music, particularly the opening song. Similar to the Love Is War song, I've listened to that on loop for hours. Oh man. It's also got a great visual style. The manga is fantastic as well. If you don't want to watch an anime, you want to reach the manga instead, you can totally go for it. But I think the anime really, there's frankly nothing removed from the manga. It's a perfect adaptation, and adding the voice work and the music really does enhance it. Although I do recommend the manga as well because it's got a very interesting visual style. So yes, Aka 13 for me, I think is a great anime. However, if after a single episode you don't really like it, then don't bother to keep going because it never picks up. It's not a show about escalating tension or anything like that. But yes, highly recommended. Okay, let's go for a classic. Oh, at this point, it's quite the classic. If you like Ninja Scroll, or if you like Naruto and you want something more serious and more dangerous, then you have Basilisk. Now, Basilisk is a Romeo and Juliet type story meets Ninja Scroll / Naruto. So you've got these two ninja clans, and the heads of both ninja clans. So these two ninja clans, and they're at war for. They've been at war for I don't know, like nearly 100 years, so for a very long time. They've been fighting each other, and they're basically killing. They're going to wipe each other out. And so the heads of both clans go, we need to sort this out. What we're going to do is I'm going to get my daughter to marry your son, and that way we will unite the clans. However, of course, some of these people do not want unity, and so they sabotage the whole thing, and both sides think the other side started it, and they also think that the whole marriage thing was just a trap to kill the other side. You know, because they're all going to meet up for the wedding, etc., etc. You know, everything's at peace. You can trust each other. Everything's completely fine. And they start killing each other. And this is like a real massacre of a show. What you will most likely enjoy the most about it is the different powers that they've got. Now, I'm not going to give anything away with the powers, because the powers are a big part of the story and the mystery of the series. Because when the show starts, apart from maybe like one or two characters, you have no idea what they can do. And that's a big part of like the ninja methodology in this series is you do not show your powers until you absolutely have to. And anyone who is not of our village who sees your power, you need to kill them. Because it's basically like a like a trump card type thing that you can tap into at any time. So I'm not going to give anything away, but I highly recommend watching it. The action is pretty strong, pretty gruesome. Very interesting powers, and I absolutely love the main villain of this series. Easily one of my favorite villains. And the powers are really creative as well. I should really mention that. And the way they're used, because everybody, it's similar to like Ninja Scroll. Everybody only has their one power, right? It's not like they don't have a full kit to work with. They just got the one thing. And there's lots of really creative ways in which they use them. And some of the powers are really disgusting as well. So I want to shove this off the screen because otherwise it's going to take up too much space. So let's put that like that. Another older show. Now this one is not going to be highly recommended or top recommended. It's going into the unusual because it's got a really unusual art style, some really unusual premises. It's an episodic show about this guy who works for this sorceress woman, and they just deal with supernatural things. It's like a bit more of a slapstick version of something like Mushishi. And as you can see by the extremely long limbs, it's got a really distinct clamp art style. And this voice actress is the voice actress I was talking about, who I absolutely adore her work, and she voices Tsukinagi. And that's how I didn't know that she was in Arknights, because I never used Tsukinagi. Very fun show. It's not the greatest thing. You know, you're not really going to find anything that you haven't really seen before. But easy one to recommend and have fun with. Let's just quickly slide this over. Then we've got this one, Shinsekai Yori, or From the New Worlds. Again, at first glance, this anime does not look that impressive. Because, you know, it's a bunch of kids, very ordinary looking kids. They're growing up in this like country town. There's something a little bit weird about them, but it doesn't seem that interesting. And the start is a bit slow, but once the villain gets involved, and the villain is easily the best part of the show. The villain is like this. Actually, I don't think I should give it away because I think he doesn't start off as a villain. Well, you don't know he's a villain at the beginning. I won't give it away then, just in case, because it's been a while since I watched this. Once the villain gets involved and the whole grander plot starts to unfurl, and the role of these kids and all these like non-human races start to intertwine, it's really interesting. Like it just turns, it becomes like a war series. You wouldn't think it looking at the cover image, but it's a pretty dark war series. Although it's not treated dark in the same way as you know, it's not like an Evangelion type dark. It's more of like if you really think about it, you realize it's you know, it's pretty depressing what these kids have to live with. In the complete opposite of depressing, we have, and I could not find a better image to represent this anime than this. Actually, hang on. Let me X that out. I'm going to click on what's further to the front. I think this is. Here we go. This image right here is the perfect representation of this amazing anime, Legend of Black Heaven. You may have actually seen a clip from this show and not known it's from this show. It's a very popular clip on YouTube. It's called something like it's either called the worst voice acting in anime, or the worst English voice acting, or the worst dub, or something like that in anime. If you ever if you recall a video about a black guy in a pink shirt giving the middle finger to a dude who bumps into him, that's from this anime. And that's not in the dub. The Japanese used English voice actors for the Americans. Yes. Yep. That's it. So the thing is, it's not actually a dub. They just got random Americans living in Japan to lend their voices to the American tourists. And he bumps into the dude. He gets punched. That's right. Yeah, the lobster bites his finger, and then he's like sticking up his middle finger to the black guy, and the black guy just punches him. Yeah, that's the one. That's the anime. You've probably seen the clip. It's from this anime, Legend of Black Heaven. Now, the premise is this guy over here is a salaryman who was once in his younger days dreamt of being a rock star. And he tried to become a rock star, but he failed. And he still has dreams of becoming a rock star. And then one day, this smoke show right here, she turns up at his work and goes, "We need you to save the world by playing the greatest guitar solo of all time." He's fighting off aliens by playing the guitar. That's the show. It is so funny. Easily one of the most unusual and most fun anime I have ever watched. Let's... Actually, I'm gonna... Hang on, how do I crop this? Whatever, I'll just put it down here. You can see the dude's head sticking up. You can recognize it. Legend of Black Heaven. Oh yeah, also, the music is awesome. It's got some really awesome rock music. And the opening sequence is really like psychedelic and mind-bending. Okay, we're down to the final 5 anime that I'm going to talk about today. As I'm doing this, I'm realizing there's this stuff that I've missed, and I'll mention it another day. So, 5th remaining. I've got to mention the worst anime ever made. This is absolutely worthy of your time. X-Arm is so bad that you have to see it. Because I can tell you how bad it is, and I still will not do it justice of just how bad this anime is. It's not just that the characters are bad, or that the writing is bad, or that the animation is poor. Literally everything about this anime is awful. There is not a single redeeming quality about this. There's not a single shot, there's not a single frame, there's not a single performance, not a single character. There is nothing good about this anime. Everything in this anime is as bad as you can imagine. And a little bit worse than that. This is the biggest train wreck to have ever graced the anime sphere. The CG is horrendous. Just the complete ignorance of physics. Everything just feels completely floaty. And now you may be wondering, why is this anime so... How could someone make something so bad? What if I told you that the director, the showrunner of X-Arm has not worked on anime whatsoever. He comes from live action. And now you're thinking, okay, that's fine, right? There have been live action directors who have, done things like, guys who did, some of the short stories and things. That's it's not the end of the world. If you put him, with a good team of anime industry professionals, it'll be fine. But you know what this dude did? This dude went, I'm not going to hire anyone who's worked on anime. I'm just going to hire my usual live action people, and they're going to make an anime in CG. And it's going to be amazing. That's what this guy thought. Genuinely, nobody who worked on this series has actually made anime before. It is hilarious. It is atrocious. And here's the thing. Here's what makes it even worse, right? You're thinking, okay, maybe there might be some live action qualities to this that are good, right? It just doesn't work as an anime or as CG. But maybe there's something, you know, where in my mind's eye, if I imagine this was live action instead of crappy CG, maybe it's good. No. There is nothing about X-Arm that works. When you watch it in the CG, you're like, hang on. But these camera movements that you're doing, no one really uses this in live action. Not even in like weird, you know, not even in like the Matrix do they do this kind of camera work. Like, where's your cinematography? Where's anything? You know, like, did you put any thought into any of this at all? And the answer to that is no. They did not put any thought into this whatsoever. And on top of that, the story just sucks. The characters are terrible, right? It's one thing to have just an absolute train wreck of, of visual production, right? But maybe you've got the most amazing writing that you've ever seen. No, it is an absolute failure, but it is such a glorious failure that it is a must watch for any true anime fan. So it goes into the unusual section. Oh yes, and Crunchyroll funded this. And by the way, Crunchyroll was like, Crunchyroll has really upped themselves. And so far, nothing they've funded has been any good. So yeah. Okay, next for another tragedy, but of a different nature. Hang on, let me click back on this so it goes in the front. For another tragedy, but of a different nature, we have the 12 Kingdoms. Now, the tragedy of the 12 Kingdoms is that it's incomplete. This is like Game of Thrones, but for older teenage audience. So basically, if you had Game of Thrones and you took away the extreme violence, the extreme gore, and the sex and all that stuff, so you toned it down in that sense, but you kept the massive world, the political conflict, all the different factions, the intrigue and all that, you'd have 12 Kingdoms. And this is also an isekai from before isekai got ruined. This girl is brought over to this fantasy world based on East Asia, China kind of area, by this guy over here. He's a Kirin, like a spirit, and they select the ruler of their territory. So there's obviously of their kingdoms. There's 12 kingdoms. And actually, I didn't mention the Manny. I'm writing it in the chat. Rumbling Hearts is the name of that love triangle one. I actually didn't mention the name. Rumbling Hearts is the English name, or it's Kimiga Nozomu Ein is the Japanese name. So yeah, 12 Kingdoms is so good. And it's one of those shows where you could totally justify 100 episodes and every single one of them being great. And sadly, it stopped at like 48. And while it did finish, it did conclude the first arc. And where the first arc concludes, that's a pretty good stopping point. But it starts the next one. It gets into the next story and you're like, oh, why'd you have to stop? So tragedy at every corner. But I still absolutely love it. And I highly recommend the 12 Kingdoms. If it was complete, it'd probably be a top recommendation. But because it isn't, I think it just goes into the high recommended section. Then we're going to go for an absolute classic of anime. The Rose of Versailles. Now, don't be fooled by the really, 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 really girly art. It was just the style of the time. If you actually look back into manga from this era, almost all like older teenage josei stuff was almost all in this like super girly style. The anime itself is they've toned it down a little bit. This one is based on French history, except there's this fictional character of Oscar. She's a woman who was basically raised as a boy because her father wanted wanted a son. And so she, you know, learned horse riding, fencing, and everything. And then she becomes the head bodyguard to Marie Antoinette, the girl in the background. And it goes through several key moments in French history, leading up to the French Revolution, and then there's the French Revolution as well. So many fascinating stories from that era are incorporated into this. The drama, the political intrigue, this is like really old. This is like possibly the oldest thing on this list. Let me think. Is there anything here that is older than this? Surely this is older than Macross. Yeah, I think this might be the oldest anime on this list. Maybe Captain Harlock. No, Akira would be more recent. Yeah, this is really quite old. And so the political intrigue, the characters, the drama is just so gripping. It is so interesting, you know. It's 50, I think it's like 52 episodes long or something like that. It's quite a long show, but it is worth every single episode. The only drawback with it is that being quite old, the animation budget is really low. Visually, as like stills, right, so it's from the era of Captain Harlock, but obviously they've based it on the Lady Oscar manga, which is older than that, which is why you've got that old style, yeah. Because around the 80s, things started to change. Yeah, the only thing with this is like there are stills of the show that are really beautiful. Like when there are key scenes, they will do like no animation, they'll instead turn it into like a painting, just to really, you know, evoke the emotion of the scene. But when there's animation, it's really not that great, particularly the action scenes. There's a lot of action scenes where they'll do it from POV. So like if they're fencing, it'll be from one character's POV and you'll just see their opponent fencing at them, like at the screen, basically. And then it'll cut back to the other shot. And they did that, so they only had to animate one character for the action scene at a time. You know, so there's some real shortcuts. However, do not let that in any way put you off from watching Rose of Versailles. It is phenomenal. This anime is hugely popular in Japan and hugely successful in France as well. Which leads me to a little bit of a tangent. Outside of Japan, France is one of the biggest countries for anime and manga, because France has a huge cartoon and comic book culture. And so most anime, particularly back in the day, you know, before the era of simul dubbing, if you were in France, you would get a French dub years before an English dub. I remember as a child seeing an episode on TV of Dragon Ball Z where Vegito, I think it is, the fusion guy, is in Majin Buu's stomach. And the scene stands out to me vividly because I remember how all the cake that Majin Buu eats was not broken down. It was like literally a slice of cake, like slices of cake in his stomach. And that image always stuck to me as a little kid. And that was dubbed in French. This was like a decade before it got dubbed in English. So yeah, like France is hugely popular with Japanese content and vice versa. There's a lot of French content that makes it very successful in Japan, and Japan absolutely loves France. Paris is the #1 foreign destination for Japanese tourists, like #1 foreign city, and it's absolutely no surprise that things like the Rose of Versailles is hugely successful. And in fact, there is a term for stuff that is successful in France, but not in English-speaking territories. It's called the French exception, where they can make a show that they think won't be successful in English, but because they're confident that it will be successful in French, it will make its money. Just on the French audience as well. So, yeah, absolutely hugely popular, and no anime better represents that mutual love of the same stuff than Rose of Versailles. Absolutely recommend it. If you want to learn some stuff about French history, apart from the protagonists, a lot of it is really true to history. Like all the key moments and such are really accurate. So this is an absolute top recommendation from me. We are really got no space left. Right, you're gonna have to go over here. Actually, you can't tell that's demonic cultivation anymore if I put that there. Okay, we are down to 2 left. Keeping on with the French theme, we have got the Count of Monte Cristo, or as it's known for the anime, Gankutsu. But I'll call it the Count of Monte Cristo just for simplicity's sake. The most visually interesting anime ever made. Now you can't tell because this is a still image, but this is a still image from the anime. However, it doesn't do it justice until you see it animated. All these interesting textures, they all flow in different ways with the animation. Nothing moves as you expect. It's like a cutout collage seeing through. It's really hard to describe and explain what it's like, but everything has this really rich texture to it. And visually it is so interesting, it's so beautiful to look at. But on top of that, it is adapting one of the greatest classic novels of all time, The Count of Monte Cristo, the ultimate revenge story. So, this one, what it does different from the source material, obviously because the source material is set in old France, this sets it far in the future. I think it's like the year 3000 or something. So it's gone full sci-fi, very opulent sci-fi. Everything is grand, everything is rich, everything is expensive. The Count, if you aren't aware of the story of the Count of Monte Cristo, he and his best friend are, they grow up together. They're, best buds, got each other's backs, and then if I recall correctly, they both fall in love with the same woman, and then the Count is going to marry the woman, but then the friend basically backstabs him, gets him killed, so that he can marry the woman instead. However, it turns out the Count doesn't die. No, he doesn't die. He gets sent to prison, and in prison, he learns how to enact revenge, and he plots his revenge because of someone he meets in prison. And then he comes back years later as the Count of Monte Cristo, because they were really poor before, and he's this really rich, like disgustingly rich man who moves back into the town. He, buys up the most expensive place nearby, and it's all part of he slowly works his way into their lives, and it's all about getting revenge for the betrayal. It is so good. This one puts a bit of a twist on it. It's in the far future, crazy, opulent sci-fi. Second, he's a vampire in this one, and that's part of the power for the revenge. I won't give anything else away, but it's so good. If you've ever seen or read any of the Count of Monte Cristo, right? When they describe like the mansion that he buys, very expensive, very grand for a human palace. In this anime adaptation, his palace is made of pure gold. It is so opulent. I don't think there's even enough gold on planet Earth to make the place this guy lives in. It's just crazy. Like, they really went over the top. But it totally works. It completely leans into the style. Yes. Highly recommended. Best revenge story of all time. And Gankutsu absolutely does the source material justice. A must watch, in my opinion. So that goes into top recommendations. We'll slot it in there. And then we come to the very final one, which is my favorite anime of all time. And I mentioned this before, so this shouldn't be a surprise to most of you, but Legend of the Galactic Heroes is the best anime ever made. This is a space opera of absolute epic proportions. At its core, you've got two factions. You've got the Empire, which is ruled by a monarch, and as the underdogs, you have the Alliance. Now, I'm simplifying the names, but there's much longer. There's the Earth Alliance, and there's, whatever. I'm keeping it very simple. Empire versus Alliance. The Alliance is a group of planets. They call themselves the Free Planets, and they have democracy. And they're fighting back after having managed to free themselves from the grip of the Empire. And so at its core, the conflict is about democracy versus monarchy. And now you're thinking, okay, that's a very simple answer. You and I'm sure, we all love democracy. Obviously, democracy is better. But what if that democracy is corrupt? And what if that empire is led by a good ruler? Which one's better? And then within that, there are all these players involved. This poster over here has a whole bunch of characters. This is like 10% of the cast of characters in this show. There is a massive, absolutely massive cast of characters. Almost every veteran voice actor that you've ever heard of, many of them have passed away at this point because the show is quite old, they had a part in this series. This was the new adaptation is fine. It's just nowhere near as good as the original. And it's just a direct retread of the original, but slimmed down, focusing more on the main stuff and cutting out the side stuff. But the side stuff is really important to me. So you should really just watch the original. There's 110 episodes in the original. Then there's I think it's a prequel series, and there's a few OVAs and stuff. So it comes out to quite a few things. And this is all based on a series of books as well. I own the entire series. And of course, I have some anime cells of Legend of the Galactic Heroes as well. Yeah. And so let me talk about these two characters. These are probably my two favorite characters in all of anime. So you got Yang Wing Lee. He's the tactician for the Alliance. And you have Reinhardt von Lohengram. He's also a tactician / commander of the Empire. Now, his sister is one of the wives, this woman over here. She's one of the wives to the Emperor. And he doesn't like that because the Emperor basically took her away. However, in exchange for that connection, he gets given high military rank and access to lots of military power. And so he takes advantage of that to rise up the ranks. And he wants to do better for the Empire. He wants to make the Empire a better place. Now, obviously, what this show does really, really well, and this is something that's very difficult to do, is that you've got these two characters. They're both equal protagonists, basically, for this show. But at no point does it go, this guy's the good guy, this guy's the bad guy, or vice versa, right? It manages to do that, but without compromising on the conflict. These two are still trying to wipe the other side's army, out of space. And what's so difficult to do when you try to do a story from both sides is to have it so that one side it's very easy to fall into the trap of either making one side like a straw man, like your typical Dances with Wolves, Poker Hunters type story, where it's you've got one side which are the underdogs and they're all good, and then you have the evil oppressors and every single person is just completely evil, and at the same time you're trying to tell this deep moral story and it just doesn't work because your characters are completely shallow. Or when you try to do a balance of both, it ends up becoming they each just go halfway, and you kind of end up having these two mediocre sets of characters on either side. It's very difficult to do 100% quality on one side and 100% quality on the other and still have all the conflict completely work. This anime is just so good. It is so good. That said, couple of caveats. It won't be for everyone because it's really long. It's slow is not the right word. It's slow in terms of the grand story is slow. but it's made up of for the most part, it's made up of a lot of smaller stories that build up towards the bigger stories. So you could have one episode where the story starts and finishes within that episode, right? So it's not slow in that sense, but the meaning of that small story in the grand scheme of things is like 1%, not even one, like 0.5% of the way towards the finish, you know? So that small story by itself, that could be something like an early episode, for instance. There's one of the nobility on one of the Empire's planets. He just, you know, he starts to exploit the people on the planet. And now, while there's a lot of, you know, corrupt and some fairly evil people high up in the high ranks, you don't step out of line. If you make the Empire look bad, it doesn't matter. You know, someone higher up is going to come and take you out. And so there's this early episode that's just about dealing with this guy who's just gone mad with power on his planet, and he thinks, oh, you know, the Emperor is on the other side of the galaxy. There's no way, you know, he cares anything about what's happening on my little planet. I should be, you know, the real ruler of this planet, etc., etc. And it's just about dealing with that one guy. And that's a that's a speck of sand in the grand story. But that single episode is not slow. But the grand story really takes its time, really builds up. And the strategy, in terms of action, there's not that much action. Most of the battles are seen from the perspective of these two characters, from the commander's perspective. They occasionally throw in a few shots, you know, up close, the dogfights and so on, but you see it from the tactical view of the battlefields. And the battles are massive in scale. Like, we're talking, you know, 100,000 people across many, many ships involved in these fights. You know, it's Warhammer 40k in that sense. And when ships go down, that's a lot of people dying. You know, it does not shy away at all from the actual costs and conflict of such an epic grand scale battle. And there's, you know, battles on multiple fronts. It's so good. So good. The anime is pretty much a perfect adaptation of the source material. Like, there's a reason why it's 110 episodes, because it's like, it's not compromising. And the music is classic European operatic music, like very German influenced operatic music, which totally fits the space opera, the grand space opera theme of it. So they've gone for a very classical European, because the inspiration very much for, you know, it's not hard to figure out. Very much the inspiration for this is like, you know, the world wars, right? You got very clear, like, the empires, like the Austro-Hungarian / German, you know, empires, and then you've got, like, you know, the Americans, the British, the Chinese on the other side, right? It's very much leaning into that, but then obviously putting a very grand personal spin on it. And so the music is very much inspired by Europe. The performances are all of them 10 out of 10. Absolutely, every single one is a 10 out of 10 performance. The dialogue is the best I've ever seen in an anime. Nothing has come close to the quality of writing, which is really good because there is very little animation in this show. Now, granted, it doesn't need much animation because it's very, very dialogue heavy. And that's the other thing I should impress upon you. If you're one who doesn't really like that much talking, it is very, very dialogue heavy. Now, you could probably have an entire episode where it's just non-stop talking, not a single speck of action, and it's just characters talking from start to finish, and that would be a perfectly normal episode for Legend of the Galactic Heroes. But yes, it is so good, and watch all the spin-offs and such as well. Although there's one OVA that's kind of weak, it's very clearly not a canon story, and it's just they did it in a bit of a different style. The visuals are slightly different. It's not bad, but it just doesn't live up to the main stuff. There was a question earlier about the newer version. So the newer version has very lovely music, and it's done by Production IG, I believe. Some really nice visuals. But what they've done is they've basically simplified it. They've gone and streamlined and really condensed it. So what would take, say, maybe 40 episodes in the original will take like 15 in the new one. It's not bad. It's just not the same. You know, if you really want to experience this series, you have to watch the original. And I absolutely love this series. Favorite anime of all time, and I very much doubt anything is ever going to beat it in my lifetime. I'd be very surprised. I hope that happens because that means something even greater has come along, but I very much doubt it. So yes, Legend of the Galactic Heroes. And that's it for my anime recommendations. I know I missed a few. Akira should have absolutely been on this list. I would have put it in the high recommendation. The characters are... I'll give you a quick review of Akira right now. The characters are kind of weak. The story needed a little bit more, but visually and the action and the audio is just 10 out of 10. Like 10 out of 10 video, 10 out of 10 audio. The directing, the cinematography in Akira is just spectacular. Yes, so I highly recommend Akira. Silent voice, I do quite like, but it's not a particular standout to me. Although I do recommend it. I just don't know if I would put it as that high on this list. Although, to be fair, like I did put something like Bubblegum Crisis, but Bubblegum Crisis for me is like a personal, one I personally like. But Silent Voice is a better anime than Bubblegum Crisis. Sakimichi no Pollen. Clock, reminds me what that one's about again, because the name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure if it's one is that Kids on a Slope? Kids on the Slope? Or am I confusing it with something else? I know there's Kids on the Slope and then there's a music one that are both very similar. Yes, Kids on the Slope. I think I may have forgotten that. One. I would need to remind myself about that one because it's been a very long time since I've seen it. What about ReZero and Shield Hero? Nid, you'll have to wait until I do the anime roast episode to hear my opinion on ReZero and Shield Hero. If you love those anime and you don't want to hear them get roasted, don't attend. Trust me. I will do a roast episode another time. Classroom of the Elite. I have not seen Classroom of the Elite. It's not Assassination Classroom, which I also don't recommend. Oh man, half the episode is just going to be me shitting on isekai anime. GTO, I considered that. I did not put it on the list. GTO for me is slightly a bit too outdated. The roast will probably be maybe this weekend or sometime next week. I'll see. Yeah, GTO for me, it's like there's a lot of it that I find really funny, but there's a lot of it where I just feel it's quite dated and just falls flat today. And there's other anime that does stuff like GTO, and I just find it, better. Mushiko Tensei, I have not seen that. Karumi. Basically, if it's come out in the last couple of years, I have not seen it. I have not had any free time, basically. Hunter x Hunter. Hunter x Hunter is not finished. To me, Hunter x Hunter is too incomplete to recommend. Like, to say whether I recommend it or not. Because it's basically just... It's like, what, 150 episodes? And it feels like it's barely got started. No, One Punch Man was not mentioned, I think, honestly, One Punch Man is kind of mediocre. I refer to it as the One Joke Man. What started the original isekai? Are you talking about Sword Art Online? Because Sword Art Online is what started the trend. Yeah, One Punch Man animation is amazing. The Genos versus Saitama fight, the visuals in that, absolutely spectacular. I just find, for the most part, it's quite boring. And I also really didn't like how One Punch Man ended, even though the entire show was about undermining these big anime fights by him defeating things in one punch. It then turns into just another dumb giant action scene at the end, you know. But yes, I'm going to no, see, here's the thing. There was isekai before SAO, but SAO is what made it big. Until SAO, Manny, I 100% agree. Genos should have been the focus of the show, not Saitama. Saitama should have been more like the legend in the background. That would have made it much more interesting. SAO is what made isekai popular. There's plenty of isekai before SAO. There's tons. I mean, I've recommended several here that predate SAO by a long time. Inuyasha, Ma is, man, that's an old one. But SAO came out and it was so big. SAO was like the Twilight. So Twilight is not new. It didn't invent the teenage vampire romance series. There's plenty before it. But Twilight was so successful, so big, that it made the genre what it is. And SAO did that for isekai. And sadly, as Kairumi has pointed out, it made it trash. Yeah, there's plenty of stuff that came before it, but they were just, in terms of success, they were just nowhere near as big as Sword Art Online. Sword Art Online is disgustingly popular. Disgustingly popular. Now, Kyoto Animation are responsible for many of the anime that I will be roasting in the roast episode. So don't you worry, I have not forgotten them. I have not forgotten KyoAni. As much as I love some of their work, there's a lot that I really hate. I have not seen Tower of God. I have heard good things about it though. Yeah, there's a lot of very recent stuff that I haven't watched. And I've been thinking, actually, if people have really enjoyed this anime section, I've been thinking I might do like a small weekly anime section where, I don't know, maybe we watch something like, not necessarily watch it together, but something like where, you know, I'll be watching this show and I'll watch whatever the latest episode is, and then we can talk about it, or we can talk about, you know, the latest episodes of several shows, or maybe I do like one show in full per week. I don't know. I need something to encourage me to get back into watching anime and to catch up on all the recent stuff that I haven't seen, because I am really far behind in my like an anime review / anime club discussion thing, you know. Just something, you know, where I can get a little bit more involved in anime again, because it's been a while and I sort of just, I wouldn't mind doing anime content on my channel, you know. Attack on Titan, most overrated show of all time. That's a preview for the roast, where Attack on Titan will be featured. Someone mentioned something before that Violet Evergarden. So Violet Evergarden, absolutely gorgeous. Such a beautiful anime. I considered putting it on the list just for the visuals, but think about it. As much as I love it personally, the protagonist is really weak. Is such a flat line of a protagonist that to me it's like it really brings down the show. Even though when watching the show and the movie, those visuals just wow me every time. The world, you know, I love the design of the world. I love many of the side characters, but that protagonist is so flat that it's like, and for me, good protagonist is so important. At minimum, you have to have a moderately decent protagonist, and then everything else around it needs to be great. But if you have such a flat line of a protagonist, then it just doesn't you know, it just can't grip me, you know. Whereas sometimes there'll be a show where there's a couple of characters that are so strong, and maybe the story around them is quite weak, but because the characters are so good, I'm like, you know, I'm along for the ride with you. I want to hang out with these characters. That sometimes can be enough. But a bad, not even a bad protagonist, just a weak protagonist, for me, can just bring it way, way down. Someone mentioned something else. Siren. Siren, that's... I think I've read the manga of that. I need a reminder of the story. I think it's been a while. I might be getting confused with a Korean manhwa. When the Arknights anime comes out, with the Arknights anime, if they do it one episode per week, we'll absolutely talk about it every single week. I 100% want to do a week-to-week discussion of the anime, of the Arknights anime. World God Only Knows, that was quite fun for a bit. I did really enjoy it for the first season, and then it sort of like ran out of steam. You know, it's a bit, you're kind of retreading the same ground. Manga recommendations when? I will do them soon-ish. I'm sort of in the middle of reading a whole bunch of manga. I'm like partway through several, and I feel like I need to finish those first so I can, you know, if I'm going to recommend them or not. Now, I have not read anywhere near as much manga as I've watched in anime. Like this, what you see here, this is like 5% of what I've seen in total. Whereas in manga, I could probably fit all the manga I've read on this screen. So, you know, I've still got quite a bit to catch up on. And I'm mainly focusing on reading stuff that has not been adapted. Did I watch the Sakura? Yeah, I didn't. I thought it was okay. The pet of Sakura House or whatever it's called. Shaft. Shaft is in a strange place for me because visually, I love so much of their what they do visually, but then they almost universally fall flat to me in terms of story. And then there's that very OG, and this is going to get roasted, the predecessor to Evangelion. I believe that was made, it's not a Shaft series, it's a Gainax series, but predecessor to Evangelion. Good God, are there people who somehow think that's an amazing show, and my God, is it terrible. Shaft, actually, there is one Shaft anime I forgot to include in here. Oh no, it's not forgotten, it's just I haven't finished it. And this is one I would recommend so far from what I've seen, and that is Bakemonogatari. Bakemonogatari is absolutely recommended from me. At least the first season, which is all I've seen. Specifically the episodes that focus on the main girl. When it's focused on the main girl, that's when the show is at its best. So yes, for anyone who's joining who doesn't know, so top tier, this is like all in one group. And then there's a high tier, all in one group. And then these ones are like the unusual recommendations, where they're perhaps not that great, but there's something awesome about them that you got to watch. Except for X-Arm, which is the worst anime ever made. And for that reason, it is absolutely worth your time. Oyasumi Poon Poon, I have, that is on my list to read. Absolutely want to read that. But yes, from Shaft, Bakemonogatari is one of the most... It has one of my favorite visual styles in anime. I love the look of that show. There are so many shots, particularly in the first episode when they're in the school, you know, the massive glass tower and all that, and he falls from the... no, she falls from the tower, that's right, because she's like light as a feather. Visually, just so much beautiful work in that show. I've seen every single episode of Initial D, and I love every single one of them. And then obviously there's the Shaft head tilt, which is great. Steins Gate, the director. I've seen Chaos Head. That was terrible. I have not seen the other two. I've never even heard of them. They're probably so bad they got buried.